reconvening in open session, and may I have everybody rise? We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance with Kevin Havey. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah. So announcements of actions taken in closed session. E1, Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Discipline, Dismissal, Release, Information Received. E2, Government Code Section 54956.9D2, Potential Litigation, One Case, Information Received. E3, Conference with Legal Counsel, Existing Litigation. Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D1, Name of case, Grijalva versus Washington Unified School District, case number CV 19-994. Information received. We are going to move on to approval of the agenda. Do I have any modifications to the agenda? Wait, I have. No modifications to the agenda? If not, can I have a motion to approve? Vice President Pizzotti moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Clerk Jackson seconds. The agenda is adopted. We're moving on to now J1, communications and celebrations. Every student by name and by need, the WSD Transportation Department.
Thank you, President Wong, Board of Trustees, staff, and guests. This evening, we'd like to take a moment to celebrate a department. This year, our theme is every student by name and by need. And when we think about our transportation department, they serve exactly that first thing in the morning. Washington Unified's focus for the 1920 school year is to continue the work and focus to meet every student by name and by need. Following the district's belief that education is a great equalizer, which builds community of higher expectations, we need to ensure that services for our students be accessible in our schools. The district invests in transportation services for our students because we're committed to ensuring equitable access for all students to have an excellent education. And we know that many families do not have access to transportation. And for their students and for themselves. And for our transportation services, they are critical to the success and opportunities for our students. So tonight, the district would like to celebrate and honor the work of our transportation department, who many times are the first school employees to welcome and set the tone of the day in transporting our students to school. When drivers and attendants know our students well, they go above and beyond to support our students by name and by need. So we'd like to honor them by giving them certificates of appreciation. We have two types of employees inside our transportation department. We have bus drivers and we have bus attendants who are assigned to students to support them during their transportation needs. Nate Hill is no stranger to us. He's our Director of Transportation, so he's going to help me in handing out the certificates, and then we'll have a board picture. So how about you name the names, and then I'll come over here.
All right. All right, so good evening, by the way. The first person, Michelle Adams. And we have Jody Blevins. And Karen Brown.
Thank you.
And we have David Day. And we have Shelley Jordan. We have Sia Rains. And we have Angelina Gomez. go to Yvette Hernandez. John Olvera. Jane Pena. And Lydia Valencia. Yes.
Do you want to stand up here?
All right, everyone face this direction. On three. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all you do. Thank you, guys. That's right. Congratulations. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. Congratulations. Thank
Together.
Superintendent Luna, are we going to go outside? Okay.
We are. Good evening, trustees. So as an addition to our celebration, it's listed on the agenda that we're going to introduce you. I'm going to let Nate introduce you since he was our local ringleader here on this project. The collaborators for our electric school bus initiative that the board approved this past June. And of course, we were successful in getting our first four, sorry, a lot of Fs there, first 4 electric school buses and charging infrastructure in the school district. Rather than replacing our diesel fleet with diesel, we've started replacing with electric. So would you like to introduce our partners from Lion?
Okay, so we have here with us Dave from Lion, and we also have Heather from the Sacramento Metro Air Quality Management District.
It's a lot.
Yes. So if they, maybe they can come up and, they really did a lot in helping us with securing our 4 buses and hopefully more in the future. So.
Would you like to each say a few words to the trustees?
Sure, thank you. Good evening, Madam President, trustees, and Superintendent Luna. My name is Heather Taylor, and I'm an air quality engineer with the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District in partnership with Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District. It was my pleasure to work on this project with Washington Unified School District, with our partner of California Resources Board incentive funds, and the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District, and of course, the Lion Electric Company for the 4 electric school buses. Your actions create a positive and meaningful benefit to our region and outgoing efforts to improve our air quality, to reduce our greenhouse emissions, and protect our climate just in a just and equitable manner. Thank you. It was my pleasure to work on this project.
Thank you.
And I don't know if anybody picked it up, but it was Heather and her organization that per school bus provided the district with $120,000 of the purchase price per bus for the privilege of taking one of our old diesel buses away and crushing it so that it would not be on the road any longer. And then, of course, so thank you so much for that, Heather. And of course, the person who Nate met, who helped us coordinate all of this and find partners to become the first district in Yolo County to begin this transition ahead of the curve. Dave, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, thank you. May I raise this up? Thank you. Good evening. Dave Anderson from Lion Electric, actually close by in Sacramento. We're in Natomas. Superintendent and Chris and board members and trustees. First of all, thank you. Thank you for this tonight. And thank you for the opportunity to work with Washington. We've worked with many school districts, but working with Nate was really easy.
Oh, yeah.
I will tell you, it was very easy. And it was a process that had to happen very quickly. When Nate said he had to have this done by 6:30, the end of June, we had a very tight window with budgets and funding. And the other part of it was I had to pull together from our group how we were going to find $880,000 for the balance and the difference. So it was multiple funding sources, plus your generous expense budget that you put towards it. And the benefits that we see are not just clean, quiet buses going down the road, but what you're going to see is better conditions for your employees, for your drivers, not just for the kids, but for the drivers. And you're going to see better conditions also for mechanics and technicians. And when a bus rolls up to a school district, it's going to be quiet, and there's going to be that 15-mile-an-hour ice cream sound. You'll hear that. I think some of you know that. It sounds like an ice cream truck, and everybody says, "Where's the ice cream?"
Will we hear it later?
No engine sound, we're required to have it make a noise, and it makes the noise of an ice cream.
Interesting.
Right. So at 14 miles an hour or less, it goes on. And it's really for the safety of the children. Because when you're pulling into a school district, children and parents are used to hearing noise and diesel and engines. You can't hear that anymore. You're aware of Teslas and electric vehicles, so things have changed. But it's really about not just cleaning the air, but cleaning the air for the people that are around it. So we're very grateful and thankful that you worked with us on this. Been working with Chris as well as Nate for future funding. We were looking for that all the time, and we see it. And there's a lot of avenues that we can go down in the next few months that we can help you hopefully get more vehicles like this. So it's a positive step. So thank you again. We appreciate it.
So again, a thank you to our partners, and President Wong, if you would like to recess for 10 minutes, the electric buses are parked outside to give the trustees and the community an opportunity to take a look. We are not offering rides this evening, but if we could have a 10-minute recess, if you'd like to take a look, they are out in the parking lot waiting for you to take a look.
We indeed would like to do so. So, recessing for 10 minutes. I think we'll be joined by Vice President Pizzotti in a little bit. I'm going to move on to Student Association reports from Miss Amira Barnett from Yolo High School. Sorry, I'm a little excited about seeing the electric buses outside. So welcome. Grateful to have you here.
Thank you. Good evening, President Wong, trustees, Superintendent Luna, district personnel, and the community. My name is Amira Barnett, and I am a senior at Yolo High School. I am here today to present the activities and information from the school sites in Washington Unified School District. At Elkhorn Village Elementary on September 13th, all students at Elkhorn engaged in their annual Best Kickoff Day. Also at Elkhorn Village, they have celebrated over 250 students for making progress on the 2018 through 2019 SBAC. At Stonegate Elementary, the Harvest Festival, Friday, October 11th, 4 o'clock p.m. through 7 o'clock p.m. They would love to see any and all board members and the district office staff. Second WEB/6th grade event on Friday, 9/27, movie night. At Westfield Village Elementary, this year is the first year Westfield had ever had sports teams. We kicked off things with both girls volleyball and boys football the week of September 16th. They are still looking for their first win, but have already made some great improvements. Also at Westfield, September 13th, they celebrated their annual Community Unity Dance and had a great turnout. On October 2nd is Walk, Bike, or Scoot to School Day. At Riverbank Elementary, Riverbank students have been busy focusing on pride. Within the classrooms and throughout the school, pride focuses on having a P, positive attitude, R, responsibility, I, integrity, D, determination, and E, empathy. Students eagerly try to earn OtterBucks by helping others, showing determination in class, having a positive attitude, and being responsible. At River City High School, River City will be participating in 2 Spirit Weeks, one for homecoming and the other for October Anti-Bullying Month, where they will be having a variety of activities and information to bring awareness to bullying. At Yolo High School, today, on September 26th, Yolo had their first Huddle Awards for students who were recognized for their best efforts and for their improvements in academics, attendance, and/or behavior in class. At Washington Middle College High School, they are proud to announce that they officially have a student council. On September 13th, the Panther student body elected Natalie Bibica as treasurer, Anahai Vasquez as secretary, Jesus Corcoles as vice president, and Madison Lampy, our WUSD student board representative, as president. Students are gearing up for college entrance exam day on October 16th. All 9th and 10th graders will be taking the PSATs, and every 11th through 12th grader will be taking the SATs. Last Saturday, our inaugural speech and debate team competed at Ponderosa High School in the first Capital Valley Forensics League debate tournament of the year. Congratulations to Grant Bell for winning first place in Student Congress. Thank you. That's all I have today.
Thank you so much, Amira. You must be very proud of her. Welcome. So, may I have the WSTA report is next.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am fresh today from 2 meetings at the district office, one with Ms. Gonzalez and one with Mr. Moisich. And these were productive and free of undue acrimony, which I greatly appreciate. This is true also of our labor relations meetings, which we continue to hold with Ms. Gonzalez and with other district personnel on a regular basis, including Mr. Parsons, very frequently. And so we really appreciate that. We do look forward, however, to a quick resolution to our current benefits concerns. And we would like to thank Doug Knepp on the part of our association for his hard work in this area. But we encourage Keenan and Associates and the district to get to a favorable resolution of these issues that so directly affect both us and our brethren and sisters of the classified association. And some of the concerns that we have currently that we're still working on is, for example, kindergarten recess supervision, and also the facilitation of IEP meetings after school, et cetera. There are things that we are working on, but we are grateful for the way in which we're able to discuss these things openly with the district. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Beers. Is anybody here from CSEA? Nobody here from CSEA, and we did not receive an update. I assume all is well. So we're moving on to public comments. At this time, members of the public may address the board on the topics of our board agenda, in addition to topics that are under the jurisdiction of the board and are not on the agenda. Although the board by law may not take any action at this meeting, the board may limit the total time for public input on any topic to 20 minutes. Unless it chooses to waive the item limit for a particular item, individual speakers may be limited to 3 minutes to comment on any topic. Public comments consisting of individual charges, complaints, or derogatory remarks about any district employee are requested to be submitted in writing to the administration in accordance with the district's complaint procedure. We do recognize that for a lot of people, commenting before the board and the audience and the people watching at home is a nerve-wracking experience, so please try to make that as easy as possible. We do ask that there not be any applause or booing or catcalling or other demonstrations to ensure that we have a respectful civil discourse here in the chambers. I'm going to move on to the first public comment. Mr. Larry Langford, can I invite you to the podium?
Good evening. Before I get started, may I approach and pass out some pictures?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm just going to read off of this, and so I won't be making a lot of eye contact because I want to get it all in 3 minutes. My name is Larry Langford. I am the volunteer public address announcer at River City High School. This year is my 20th year doing football, and it will be my 11th year announcing both boys and girls basketball. As you all know, River City High School is the largest campus in the Washington Unified School District and is the only comprehensive high school in West Sacramento. This campus opened in January of 2009 and has had thousands upon thousands of visitors, being students, staff, teams, officials, parents, etc., attending various events there. I'm only going to be addressing the sporting events at the stadium and in the gym, but I'm certain that what I am speaking about affects most, if not all, other events held at the school. River City High School should be, and some say it is, the crown jewel of our district and our city. I'm sure you've all heard the saying, perception is reality. Well, when people attend sporting events at River City High School, they are befuddled and amazed that a campus like River City High School has such a cheap and horrible sound system, both at the stadium and in the gym. When this campus was built, both the stadium and gym sound systems were poorly set up. I sometimes wonder if the systems were purchased at a clearance rack. They sound terrible at games and at other events of the school. They are so bad that people cannot even hear or understand what is being said or played. Okay, if you don't mind taking a look at the pictures. Pictures 1 through 6 are the system that is in the announcer's booth at the stadium. As you look at picture number 1, I have yet to find anyone who can explain what all of that stuff is for. Picture number 7 is of a light pole on the visitor side of the field. You probably aren't aware of this, but originally speakers were placed on 4 of the light poles and the speakers were facing the field. That picture you're looking at there is a light pole without a speaker, leaving only 3 speakers for the entire stadium. And I'll just remind you that that pole has not had a speaker for probably 6 to 8 years, and the school is just barely 9 or 10 years old. Picture number 8 is the most embarrassing photo for us. This is how we play the music during timeouts and for the halftime performances of our cheerleaders, as well as the visiting cheerleaders, and they can barely hear it from the field or in the stands. In the gym, for basketball, we have used a portable sound system that reminds me of a karaoke machine. It is about 1 foot by 3 foot in size with a super long cord for the mic. The unit is placed in the bleachers behind the home bench. I understand now the original system has recently been altered significantly to sound somewhat decent. This issue has been brought to the district's attention several times over the years, even the first time we started to use them. I'm finishing up right here. I'm finishing up right here. I don't know how much longer I will continue voluntary announcing. I do enjoy it, but have not had a child there since 2010. But before I retire or hang it up, I would love to see the systems upgraded and upgraded correctly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to finish.
Yep, absolutely. Mr. Malik.
Good evening, members of the board. Before I start, I'm getting text messages from the public as to the quality of the audio going out. So just so that they are aware, I'm hoping this isn't in my 3 minutes. So I'm just letting you know what the public is telling me is that the audio on the output is very low and shallow, and they're having a hard time hearing us from the public. With that,
It may just be me mumbling, Mr. Malik. Yep, that's
something
right.
like that, right?
Something like that.
Good evening, members of the board, assistant superintendents, Superintendent Luna. I'm here tonight to dovetail onto some of those issues that Mr. Langford has been speaking of. The speaker issue is a quality issue. There's definitely a need and a room for improvement. Over the past 4 years, I have volunteered and asked Larry Langford to mentor me as the announcer. I live in this community. I work hard at my school. People know that they can come for me for union issues or teacher-related issues or site issues, and I want to be there, and I love announcing. I love announcing the JV games and helping Larry with the varsity games. As a veteran, as a member of this community, I respect his knowledge of the game and also what he teaches me in my approach, and it helps me be a better announcer as well. And I do realize that he will eventually at one point have to step away. The sound system issue is something that could be clarified and fixed very readily, and it has been an issue for several years. I would also like to make it aware, I have put it in my notes with the request for facilities usage that has gone out to the district, of the possibility of solar lighting, and I just read the report, of solar lighting for the baseball and softball fields. Parents oftentimes don't have enough time to get to a 3:30 or 5 o'clock start. Sometimes games are cut short because of inadequate lighting. A solar panel lighting setup with additional lighting for baseball games allows parents to attend, and who doesn't like a nice night baseball game? With that, as Mr. Langford said, this is the shining star or the crown jewel in Washington Unified. As I work there, I see it a lot. You can't have diamond quality with cubic zirconia budget. And this is an issue that I understand goes to both sides, and we talk about money a lot. WUSD wants the best for their kids.
They want the best for their programs. It does take investment. You look at other schools, you look at Napa's beautiful sports complex, you look at Jesuit or other places in other schools. They have put out the money for the quality. Quality attracts quality. Quality attracts quality. Further, there are teachers at the school that I know personally that have been given offers of upwards of $100,000 of new sports equipment for a potential new weight room, weight facility, almost an entire workout facility. Unfortunately, they do not have the space. And so when we're talking about facilities and master plan, we must be mindful of that. The community is willing to reach out, wants to reach out, and I know personally of people who have access to over $100,000 worth of athletic equipment in good condition, ready to improve our students and our sports programs. You don't get diamonds with cubic zirconia budgeting. Finally, there's a $8,000 mat lifter being not used whatsoever in the alternate gym, and I mentioned this 6 years ago. It's a piece of equipment we just have sitting around. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Ms. Danny Langford.
So further about River City, just a quick thing. I know we do a lot of recognition on the band boosters, and you might not be aware, but the athletic boosters used to be the only parent club on River City's campus for about 50 years. I know because we got involved before our children were ever even in junior high. And I just think it would be nice that they get a little recognition because they literally raise tens of thousands of dollars that go back into the programs as well as scholarships. And a child, for instance, that's got a participation of 4 years gets about a $1,000 scholarship from the boosters, not from a trust, not from anything else, from the boosters. So just I'd like to put that out there since they were talking about River City. Furthermore, with the master facilities plan, it was very disheartening that River City was lumped into Bright and the middle college for the master facilities plan meeting. And honestly, somebody that's tuned in like me, I didn't even see it. I didn't catch it. I know a lot of parents want to be able to have a voice on that campus. And I really hope that you will make sure that one gets scheduled for that campus because I think it's important, especially being it's our largest campus. It was built the same time as Stonegate, so if you're going to have one at Stonegate, you may as well have one at the high school also. I know at Bright, a big issue was the dinner theater. That's great, but honestly, we paid on 2 bonds now for a performing arts theater. And I know none of you guys were on the board when all that the high school was built and everything, but I just think that that's more important at this point. I want to also ask if the grants do not come through for the parks such as at the new Westmore Oaks with the city, what will happen then? What's our plan B? Will we have money for landscaping and cleaning it up? Because it looks horrible, and it saddens me because that is my husband's you know what I'm trying to say. My kids, too. We put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears at that school. And I also had a question on the electric buses that just came to mind when I got to see it on the way in. In case of an emergency, if we had to evacuate, would we be able to use our electric buses? Because if we had, let's say, for instance, a levee breakout in Southport, which I pray would never happen, will they run out of gas or out of electricity sitting in line in the traffic trying to evacuate our students? Because on Facebook, there was a recent article about a police chase with a new electric car that ran out of juice in the middle of the chase. So it was just something that came to mind because we only have a few exits off our island in Southport, so there's going to be a lot of lines if we have a catastrophic event. Thank you.
Excellent. So we are going to move on to M, information and discussion items. M1, discussion of funding of CalPERS other post-retirement benefits, OPEB, using the California Employers Retiree Trust CERBDVT fund for an offset liability and future cost of employee post-retirement health care. That was a mouthful. I feel like that's the longest
It is a
agenda
mouthful.
item description that I've read in quite some time.
It is.
Ms. Mascanitas.
Good evening again, trustees, colleagues, and community. This is an informational item I'm bringing to you. If the board gives direction to move ahead, I will bring it back to the board for action. This is the informational portion, which I like to do first, of course. I'm giving you this presentation. It's very brief at actually the request of the board over the past 8 months when we were going through the various budget clarification issues. One of the things that we have to do annually as a school district is we have to do a GASB 75, which is an odd way of saying that every other year I have to do an actuarial report for the board to tell you what your other post-employment retirement benefit cost is. What does that mean? That is the cost that the district incurs through contractually guaranteeing health care benefits after employees separate from the district. So currently we do have an OPEB, or the other post-employment health care benefit cost, and we are currently paying it as you go to the tune of between $400,000 and $500,000 a year, which comes directly out of the general fund. And of course that means we're spending current year money intended for current year students on folks that have served and have then left the district. So one of the actions that is being highly recommended, it's not a new one, by CalPERS, is that we invest, once we do an actuarial report, that we invest in the SERPT funding. And what that means is that instead of paying as we go, we invest money in a higher yield index fund run by CalPERS, and that we can use not just the principal, but the interest yielded from that interest to pay OPEB liability when we have enough money in there to pay for it. So that's the sort of general concept that I'm going to be going over tonight, and I'm going to give you some specifics about our district so that you have the information that was requested this past year. And I apologize, it's taken me that long to get there, but it took me a while to get there. I have done this with other districts, so I'm fairly familiar with the fund. So our current OPEB liability as of 2017 is about $11 million. And we determine that by looking at the actual amounts that we pay out and what it's going to be for the next 20 and 30 years using a conservative estimate. If we invest in the SERPT with CalPERS, we get a discount rate of 3.5%. What does that mean? Does it actually discount the cost? No, it does not. It discounts the actual actuarial evaluation of having that debt on our books. Currently, the reason that we have to do this every other year is that $11 million is considered debt that we have to budget for annually. We are allowed to take it proportionally off our books if we invest into SERPT so that it comes off, so that positively affects our credit rating and that eventually positively affects our cash flow. So what's the discount rate once we start investing? It's 3.5%. What would be a totally funded OPEB account with CalPERS be? Currently, it would be $10.987 million if we were to fully fund that account. Currently, what's our funded status? It's zero. Okay, why would you do something like this? Why would you invest with CalPERS rather than leaving the money in our local reserves? There's a number of reasons. One of the reasons, and I'm not reading that, sorry, I just sort of do this, but so I will look up there to make sure I've hit all of their reasons, but I'll just tell you from a financial standpoint. So we are allowed to earn more than LAIF interest. So currently, all of our reserves are kept in county accounts, and we receive LAIF interest annually. LAIF interest is short-term interest, and it yields between 1% and 3% rather than the market index, which is anywhere between 7% and 14%, depending upon the year. So we miss out on a lot of interest if you invest, obviously, big chunks reserves, then we are able to yield that interest. So we'd be able to yield more interest. It reduces the liability on our books, which improves our credit rating, and it also is a potential cash management strategy in the event that there is a financial downturn or we are not able to make ends meet year to year. Instead of taking that $400,000 or $500,000 out of our annual funds to pay for retiree benefits, if we get into a financially difficult position, we can take it out of that fund, which would then provide $400,000 to $500,000 of relief to the general fund in any given year until we draw down all of that money or the balance hits zero. I think I hit all of their points in my own words. Yes, good. All right. So this is just an illustration provided by CalPERS. This was sort of done with the idea of a district our size. So this is a comparable school district and what they would do as a pay-as-you-go versus pre-funding. Okay, paying as you go, you can see that the liability is larger and it's discounted once they start contributing to the SERPT fund. And so their net OPEB liability in the pay-as-you-go model is $8 million or 7.869 versus as they begin to fund, their total contribution there is 1.5 million, and then they can write off 51% of that obligation on their books, right, for roughly a 20% contribution. Okay, so that's just illustrating the very points that I just discussed. Again, the advantages of doing this pre-funding, it is GASB compliant, it is allowed to be added into our actuarial report, it does give us a potential revenue stream in a rough time, and we are able to generate more revenue and interest from that investment. And of course, they administer all of it. We control the funding policy. We decide if, when, and how much to contribute. So if we decide to contribute now, it doesn't mean that we're obligated to contribute any more next year or the year after or even the year after that. We can contribute now. We can contribute 5 years later and still get the benefit and still yield the interest, very much like an individual's personal investment account. So you invest when you have the money to invest. So the contributions are never required. We can completely differentiate contributions. We can contribute $1 million one year and $10 million another one. There is no set amount. You can contribute $100,000. It's completely up to the board and local decision making. We decide if and when to seek reimbursement. So to actually receive money back from that SERPT account, whoever the CBO would have to come to you and present to you that they would like to withdraw and the amount that they would like to withdraw and what that would be used for. It obviously can only be used for the OPEB liability instead of pay as you go, but they would then need to explain to you why we want that relief at that time. Okay? We decide on an asset allocation strategy. There's only 3 asset allocation strategies, and 85% of members actually are in number 1, which is the most aggressive, which is long-term for an index fund. It is the most common investment strategy we see, but we do get to decide on the asset allocation strategy from moderately aggressive to fairly conservative. And it does help maintain control, again, of that actuarial assumption, 2 A's in a row, sorry about that, actuarial assumption, which then lowers our potential liabilities on the books for when we look to do things like bonds. This goes through some of the technical parts that are in your presentation. Also attached to tonight's item are a number of other items that this is referencing. Everything is compliant, of course, since it is a state-run investment fund. And here we see the current rates of return using strategy 1, 2, or 3, and 1 through 3 going from the most aggressive to the most conservative. And you can see the current 10-year average return, much higher than 1 to 3%, and it compounds. This just gives you what they're using as their asset class allocations and the time weighted. So you can see this not just in short term, but long term if you're interested. The SERPT program with CalPERS is an all-inclusive program, which means that all of the expensive to run the fund actually come out of the proceeds of the fund. So what you're seeing is that yielded percentage benefit is after they're already taking what it takes to manage the fund from the investment yieldings. So we don't have to pay to play. We aren't paying up front. They are taking a percentage of what they earn for the municipalities and school districts participating. Whoops. And then this is just some more general information. How many people and municipalities and organizations are currently participating, 567, including the state. You can see that there's currently 71 school districts participating, and they're mostly spread throughout the state, and they're all at different rates. So some of them are at 100% funded, which means they started a while ago, and some of them are as little as 1% funded. So that's really, there's some resources listed up there, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. We can decide where to go after that or any direction.
Questions, comments? Vice President Pizzotti, I know this has been a long time coming in terms of conversation, but I know other people also on the board have some comments and questions, so go ahead.
Sure. So this is something that I've kind of been, really harping on in terms of wanting to get us invested. I don't know that everybody knows this, but when we're paying as we go, that is money off the top for the general fund. And this is very similar to a savings account that earns way more interest than we ever possibly could. When we hit financial hard times, while this can only be used for OPEB, turning that spigot on to pay for the OPEB benefits means that's money we don't have to spend out of the general fund to do that in a financial hardship. So I am 100% on board with this. I think this is something financially that we really can't afford not to do, especially as our liability grows. So I just wanted to make a couple of comments on that. I don't have any questions.
I appreciate the consistency and comments over the years. So Clerk Jackson?
Can you tell us what are the pros and cons of doing the pay-as-you-go versus pre-funding the liability? Which, and honestly, I'll be honest, because for me, when we say, unfunded liabilities, it's kind of a misnomer. I mean, we all have unfunded liabilities because it's just when you look at the mortgages that we pay on house, it's not like that all of a sudden we're going to get a statement from someone that says, okay, well, we have to pay this money tomorrow. So yes, is it unfunded? Yes, but we all have unfunded liabilities.
So in the case of school districts, since we do all of our budgets and all of our financial transactions with the exception of construction, on a year-by-year basis, we actually do get a bill, right? So this unfunded liability is one that we get an annual bill for.
Interesting.
There are others that we get annual bills for as well. So I will be, I'm sure you love my dense executive summary, so you'll be getting another one on our non-voter approved debt. So currently we contribute anywhere between $300,000 to $1 million a year from the general fund to pay off our internal debt, COPs, QSCABs, CREBs. Same thing with the OPEB, since we don't set money aside for the employees when they retire to pay their health care benefit until they're 65 when they're here, then we actually continue to pay when those employees are no longer here, but we get the money for the children who are here at the time, and that's why it's considered unfunded. So our revenues are meant to serve the children that are here, but we're paying for something that should have been paid years ago. We should have set that money aside. Technically, that's the way it's supposed to be done. So that's why it's called an unfunded liability, because we're using current year money to pay for a promise that we made 20, 30, 40 years ago, however long it's been since that person has left. So that's why it's technically called an unfunded liability. But in the case of the OPEB and the non-voter approved debt, we do actually get those bills every year.
Pros and cons.
Pros and cons. The pro is all the stuff that I've outlined, right? Higher interest, you take it off the books, especially, let's say in 10 years we could get it fully funded. That takes it out of the general fund entirely, and then we just manage the investment. We take it out every year, and that $400,000 or $500,000 a year, we don't have to take out of the general fund every year to pay that bill, right? The cons takes out of my cash flow, right? So the saying used to be cash is king. I like to say cash is queen. It's personal preference, but cash is still what we need to pay all of the bills when they come in. And so you have to be careful, because everybody always looks at fund balance. Fund balance actually isn't cash. It's our projection of what cash is going to be in the future, right? Assuming that all of our expenses and revenues match what we think. So you never want to leave yourself cash short, but I would not recommend investing to you if I thought we were going to be short on cash, right? So that's why it's actually taken me so long, because I've done a cash flow analysis, and I've been waiting to see how our budget actually hits the books, which is actually another dense presentation we're doing this evening. So you'll be able to see why I've brought it back after the board's urging tonight, because we are doing fiscal close from last year.
And for a district our size, then what would be our fully funded amount for said account?
Fully funded amount for
this account?
As of 2017, it was about $11 million. We have to have the actuarial done every other year, so it is due again this year, and I will be bringing it back to the board after it's complete. It tends to go up over time because the cost of providing those benefits goes up over time. We never see healthcare costs go down. Now, someday, if we go to some of the national discussed models, maybe we'll start to see that even off or go down, but at this point, we can always count on healthcare costs going up.
Okay, and one last question is, so in our situations, then what would be a good method for us to be able to fund, or at least start funding an account like this?
So I tend to be, and it's my job, but some of you know me personally, I'm not particularly conservative in my personal life, but my job is to be fiscally conservative for the board and the district, right? So I don't make many bones about that. I would wait to see, when you do fiscal close every year, what is it you can afford to invest that you've yielded because you've worked hard at saving money, right? So if you've saved a little bit of money, then instead of just spending it, which is where school districts tend to get in trouble, because then they, a penny saved is two pennies spent typically in public education, right? So what I would recommend is, until you fully funded this liability, that when you manage to save some money out of a fiscal year, when you've closed and you've yielded that savings and we know exactly what it is, then you have some guidelines of what can you afford to invest rather than spending it.
Yeah, I mean, because to me, it just makes sense to do something like this. I'm in agreement with Vice President Pizzotti. I think if it's something that we can do, it's definitely something that should be done, and done as quickly, and trying to get to the fully funded status as quickly as possible. So that way we do have more monies that are supposed to be spent on today's kids that can be spent on today's kids. To me, it just seems like the most prudent thing to do. But the one thing that I would hate to see happen is for us to kind of move down this road and then all of a sudden just do it half-assed, so to speak, excuse my language, but, because then at that point, then what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
So, thanks.
Takes commitment.
Do you have a comment? Trustee Kirby Gonzalez?
Thank you, and I want to thank my board colleagues and thank Clerk Jackson for his questions. We sat in the same presentation. We didn't talk because we're not allowed to, and we didn't realize we were in the same presentation. But at CSB, and that was really helpful for the overview, and I appreciate you taking the time to put all this together. It's been very helpful to learn and to go through this. My understanding, but correct me if I'm wrong, is that if we put money into that account, and then there was a crisis, that money can be taken out only for, obviously, these reasons. But there's no other risk for us in terms of that way, correct? If we're very prudent with the amount of money we put in, we're very careful about that.
Well, there is no such thing as a no-risk investment, right? Even our LAIF investments with the county are no risk, right? I can't say that. So is there a risk that it 1 year might earn, if you look at those different points in time, the amount that was yielded, are there times when index funds yield less than low interest short-term lending like our LAIF funds do? Yes, that does happen occasionally. Right, we're seeing negative interest rates on short-term yields right now, which is like a bizarre.
You have an inverted yield.
Yeah, right, which is a bizarre thing that we never thought to see in real life.
It's not a good time to invest right now.
Right, so is it possible that there's some risk there that we don't earn as much or that we lose part of our principal? There always is, but if you look at index funds, they are the most controlled way to yield higher term interest over the long term. So they're considered a fairly safe investment, which is why a lot of municipalities invest in them.
Thank you, yeah. Okay, and it also helps to see to the cities, the towns, the school districts. I appreciated that list too, to see who's doing this, and so that was good. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So this is helpful. I mean, we passed the board policy a little while ago to be able to do this. My question is regarding, we're going into contract negotiations again, whether or not we've actually touched bases with our unions about this and where they are in that conversation, which I think is an important piece of the conversation. I appreciate, I was noticing, Clerk Jackson, that Sac City is actually on this list. And so, so they're not doing anything with it. So just, I mean, even with that, they were in a crisis. And anyways, I'm just kind of.
Their name is just on the
like,
list.
I wanted to kind of make that note as well, that just there are our neighbors who are participating in this and just wondering how that works out. The other thing is that I mentioned earlier is that a concept of an inverted yield, where the long-term yield is actually lower right now than the short-term yield. So might not be the right time to invest in something like this, because until that kind of figures itself out. And the liquidity of it all, right? Especially when we came off last year with some cuts, right? That I absolutely appreciate the presentation. And I know that it's been a long time coming, and I think you're still going to, I mean, that's going to be in the back of our minds, but until we get, we're in a space where, to your point, that we are kind of operating in a place where we can actually close in on that unfunded liability. I know both of my colleagues don't like calling it that. The money that we owe to our teachers who actually taught for us and had retired.
Fulfilling our commitments.
I'm not sure if this is the right time to actually make an investment right now, and without actually also hearing from our labor partners, right, as we go into our contract negotiations. That's those are my thoughts, but. All those are kind of right now, appreciate the presentation, not sure if we're in a space to actually do that right now.
I got a comment.
Yeah, Vice President Pizzotti.
Yeah, so another, I guess, mechanism for funding is when we do see one-time funding come in, that would be another source of revenue to sort of stash away portions of, not wholeheartedly the whole kit and caboodle. If we're, like you said, in a position where we're looking at projections showing us that we're going to be, in the black this year, then we can say maybe we put, $100,000, $200,000 into this, because after time, that's what we want. It's to slowly build, this this account up. In my opinion, that is, one way of adding extra revenue to it. The other, to your comment, President Wong, I would think it would absolutely be crucial to have both unions on board. I think they would probably appreciate that dialogue, in terms of getting buy-off on this. But I would assume, that's something that, the staff here would definitely be having those conversations. Personally, I've gone through this with the union that I represent, and it was not an option. They started taking money out of our paychecks in order to get a trust account built. So we had to go, we got a raise of, say, 3%, but we had to contribute 1.3% of that raise. So our actual raise was only 1.7. So, that's something that, is something to consider too in the future. But the way I see it is, this is money going to an account that is just a savings account. It is a way to utilize, however, financially difficult the times may be, to offset certain problems in the general fund.
Great. As a standalone item, it's great. I don't know if anybody else this is a discussion item, so I don't know if you were asking for direction, but again, absent that conversation with our unions, I think that's just part of that conversation that's happening in the future, everything I lined out. And again, we laid off significant number of folks last year, so, you know, it's a conversation. A future conversation in budgeting. I don't know if, I mean, is this something that folks are wanting direction to move forward in?
Well, what I'm thinking is if we have, and the reason, and I understand how investments work, and so I didn't word my last question as well as I should have in terms of the safe component, but what I meant was you can put a little bit in. You don't need to, stretch ourselves so thin. But I think that starting that, to me, as long as those conversations happen with the unions, I think that's a good point. And you've looked through the budget and you feel confident with the numbers that we're talking about, then I feel comfortable moving forward. I think it's a smart decision financially for the future, given those factors.
So, we need to check in with our unions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I'm in agreement with you, though, because it's good to have all the parties involved in the decision-making. I mean, because personally, as I was reading this in preparation for tonight's meeting, and actually, I pulled it back up too, that I noticed there was an article that I read earlier in the week from CSBA about a similar type of an issue. But then I read the budget report, where it looks like we had a little bit of a
savings.
I mean, something like that, in my opinion, would be a good way to kind of jumpstart that. Once the books are closed, and hey, we know we actually end up saving $500,000, $1 million, whatever, in a particular year. It's been able to take those types of funds and put those types of funds into an existing account to kind of more or less just to get things started. I mean, the prudent thing would have been is when we were getting all these one-time funds coming into the district the last few years, we've been able to take those kinds of monies and put those things aside to be able to fund it.
A lot of one-time funds no longer comes without strings attached, though.
Right.
So we are being very clearly directed when we get one-time funds, like the new special education funds that we were told are one-time. They audit and look that we spent it on what they're giving it for. So taking it out of what's left at the end of the year is also the safest financial audit perspective for the district.
Right.
No, I'm
So
sorry.
I'm hearing two things. Yes, we're in agreement that we need to talk to our unions, and this is a discussion for closing out our books, the decisions that we can make when we close out our books. Was that my understanding?
So
I
I will
think the direction
understand that
was-
as maybe start having that conversation with the unions and then bring it back at fiscal close
that's what I
in
thought.
December.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Again, those two things.
Okay.
Okay. All right, moving on to the next agenda discussion item is, well, we don't have anything on this. Approval of service with Facilitron for district facility use agreements.
No, this is the
I jumped over.
solar performance.
Solar performance review.
Report.
I was jumping ahead.
So attached to this evening's agenda, and there's no reason, I'm just basically bringing it up to ask questions. So over the course of the past year, and it's again taken me time to get my arms around this with some of the other items we were working on this past year, is there's been a lot of questions asked by actually, I know our former WSTA president, Don Stauffer, as well as by the board of how much did we invest in solar, what kind of savings are they yielding, et cetera. And so attached to this evening's board agenda was an executive summary from myself, as well as a comprehensive report from the company that we are now partnering with, Arc Energy, which we will be producing annually. We do that together, myself and Angie Nichols in facilities, and myself and Terry Sousa, to make sure that all of the numbers are matching up and that it's accurately reported out to the board. And very briefly, what you'll see is the cost of the 3 different solar installations that the district went about installing, when they were installed, and then a detailed report of what they've actually yielded. The majority of the savings has gone directly to paying off the debt that we accrued to actually install them. We will start to see greater savings after those loans are paid off, obviously. So it is a long-term investment strategy. An approximate investment to this point was $18 million for phases 1 through 3. And you can see in the report when they will start yielding long-term savings. So I'm just here to answer questions on those, on that information.
Do I have questions?
Yes.
Clerk Jackson.
The timing on this is actually kind of interesting because I'm actually going through a similar type of scenario with the solar that I have on my house, where it appears as though the numbers here are kind of mirroring the numbers at home, and that the production that we're expecting to get out of the systems that have installed aren't necessarily living up to what they were billed as, so to speak. But one thing that I was kind of confused a little bit on is that in the report it says we have an annual cost savings over $1 million versus the cost of purchase directly from the power provider. But then later on it says that we actually have a net loss of approximately $330,000.
Correct.
Can you explain that for me?
Sure. So that $1.5 million that we're saving over buying power directly from PG&E, we are turning it around and paying the bank on the loan that we took to actually install the solar, as well as maintenance costs. So ARC is also our maintenance provider. So the ongoing costs are not just the cost of the principal and the interest of the loans, but our annual maintenance costs. And so we've done better at that since my arrival. We've actually consolidated contracts, so we're seeing better yield. But until we start paying off full principal, we won't see that savings because we're using it to pay the interest. So,
Right.
yep.
And you said that after 2039, the savings is projected to be over about $1 million annually.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also around the time when the panels are reaching their expiration date.
Fun how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's correct. Now, the major expense of installing solar is the installation, the connection to the solar grid, as well as the infrastructure. It's actually not the panels. The panels are the considered relatively the inexpensive portion. So already, as a panel loses performance, so let's say a panel stops producing above the 85% that we're looking for, we actually replace that now. It's a part of our maintenance budget,
okay.
Right? So by 2039, all the infrastructure that those big towers holding up all the panels over play areas or parking lots, or we have a massive solar field at the comprehensive high school, the infrastructure will be paid off. We are already maintaining and replacing panels as they need it. And so that will continue to go on. And so then it will just be a savings of what we're generating ourselves versus paying PG&E for. So long-term, it is actually a good investment.
So
Really long-term.
So when you talk about maintenance, and that's what we're referring to as the actual structures and not necessarily the panels in themselves then?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Trustee?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
So I know you talked about consolidating the 3 contracts, and my recollection was that River City's contract, that initially they had gone out of business, maybe that company they used, and within the contract was cleaning services, like to keep everything clean, and they weren't doing that, and so the panels were not working optimally, if I'm remembering correctly. So that now it sounds like is all under one contract, and
Correct.
everything is being, the maintenance is there, everything's making sure that it's clean and working.
Well, and so something I've learned in this process, clean is a relative term when it comes to solar. So cleaning will only take place when it actually impedes the ability of the panel to generate the solar power above the threshold, which is the high 80th percentile that we're looking at. And so a panel can visually to you, especially, I don't know how you all behave, but at home, clean for me is clean, right? And so I've actually asked that they be clean because they looked unsightly to me, but if it doesn't affect the power generation, they will not clean them. So cleaning just means as far as it affects power generation.
Great, but they're keeping an eye on all that, so.
We
if
are
there's a red
monitoring
flag,
everything.
Okay.
All of the guarantees that we originally had for installing solar from the government are now gone. However, the contract that we have does have a guarantee as far as if they miss maintaining something and we lose out on what we should have been generating, we get that reimbursed. So one of the things that we got this last year was a $100,000 check because for a month and a half, they missed that the Bridgeway Island solar was not generating. And so they then had to make that up to us for what we had to pay.
Okay, great.
So.
It must have been a
Vice
regional.
President Pizzotti and I had a question on your performance percentage. Is this why Bridgeway Island is at 61%? And then how does Stonegate get to 101%?
Because it generates more than they're
Right, that they
rated for.
use? So, but kind of, is it practice, is it wind? So just we're curious as to how do we increase the percentage of use, but why 61% at Bridgeway, one of our newer schools?
Because the panels were out for about
Okay, we just wanted.
almost 60 days.
Yeah. So, I had the same issue, at my house where my panels were out for about 4 months out of the year last year, and actually 5 months out of the year last year, and all during the peak performance months of the year. And so we actually, at the end of the year, we got the same thing. We got a check at the end of the year because the panels missed their performance guarantee. Now, here we are a year later where they are up and they're still missing, and even though they're only 3 years old, they're only performing at about 81% of what we were promised, so.
Right. Yeah, so that's kind of like the same with mine. The panels were out, and I was just wondering, like, isn't there a provider that comes out and says, hey, look, the panels are not working up to efficiency, so we're going to come up and we're going to fix and replace those? Because that's what happened to my house,
Yes,
unfortunately.
That's what we do with ARC. That's why we have one provider for the whole district now.
Okay.
To make sure that not only do we catch it after the fact, which is nice that we have the performance guarantee, but I want to make sure that they're working as they're supposed to every month. So we actually monitor them all the time now.
Right, so, but do they pay us if they don't meet their mark, the balance in between of what they're supposed to be? I mean, and that's kind of what, like, in my house, when our panels didn't meet their mark, our true-up from PG&E was, almost $1,000. But we're getting a check back from the company.
Correct.
Stating, okay, here you go, this should cover the balance on your true-up. So, I mean, is that the way it works?
That's exactly what happened last year, yes.
Okay.
That's why we got the $100,000
Correct.
check. Any other questions about the report? Trustee Kirby Gonzalez?
Thank you. I just have one last comment. It's not a question on this, but as we talk about our facility plans moving forward, when that comes back to us, I know that the cost, as you just brought up too, of installing is so very expensive. So as we talk about if a facility is changed or moved or if things might happen, I'm sure that will be part of the conversation too, the solar panels and what we do with.
Yes, it's also considered a principal investment, meaning that that loan is guaranteed against the installation of the infrastructure. And so we would have to address, are we required to move that infrastructure if it exists at a site that we do something with as a part of doing something with the site?
Great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, thank you.
Thank you,
And no other
trustees.
questions, no other comments? I see a lot of reactions up here from people with personal solar panels. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Montanez. Superintendent Luna, we're moving on to M3, the 2019-2020 superintendent goal.
Thank you, President Wong, Board of Trustees. This evening,
Sorry, she's trying to gather these cats and work.
So this particular item, I'd like to share my superintendent goals for this coming year for the board to make suggestions, make comments. But just to preface before we get into the goals, that these are overarching goals for the school year, meaning they're very higher level. In other words, it's not going to talk about the details of how we administrate and implement and operate. As we've consistently practiced, our superintendent goals that are shared each year are the metrics and the criteria for which the Board of Trustees does my annual evaluation. So I want to start that in the beginning of this school year, I promised all of our staff and our administration nothing new. That we have spent the last 3 years building systems for sustainability of best practices for the needs of the district. So now it's time to go deeper, and that's what I promised our staff on the first day welcoming back. All 400 certificated and administration, all 400 classified. That it's time to go deeper with the systems that we've been putting in place and refine along the way in our learning, because it is a journey of learning. Nothing will ever be the same year to year. We need to make sure that we're improving and getting better each year and learning through it. So that said, we've asked our teachers a few years ago to start with the concept of growth mindsets. And in growth mindsets, that means that we think differently and we're allowed to make mistakes, because that's how we learn. And not necessarily mistakes, but just this is how we're learning, what we're doing, as nothing will ever be perfect. But we are on a journey of improvement. So in the first part, what I'd like to start with are the board priorities that were determined last year. And my assumption is that they have not changed because they represent the California dashboard, in addition to the focus areas of the California School Boards Association. So we have 3 areas that the board chose as priorities, which are the conditions of learning, which represents the different components of the California dashboard. The pupil outcomes, as you know, the state has come out with more metrics and a little bit more defined areas for college and career readiness. And then in terms of engagement, that's very local level. Very local. I want to also assure the board that while the board has your priorities, that to fit in my goals under your board priorities, I also have to fit in with the local control accountability plan. All 3 of those things should be aligned. And I want to make sure that hearing the goals tonight, that you provide that feedback, making sure that they are aligned. So the first goal is in regards to student achievement and academic progress. And again, our theme of this year is every student by name and by need. So last year, we also had student achievement and academic progress. And so I put them both side by side because I'm going to stay committed to nothing new, but we need to go deeper so that we really implement and do quality and sustainability for the systems that we've been putting in place. So what you'll see in the difference under student achievement, of course, is progress and growth. Now, I don't know many superintendents who put that on their evaluation as one of the criteria of the goals, but I do, because every outcome of our students is personal. It's personal to me. So when our students are not making progress, I wear that on my shoulders. So I'm going to be a little bit more specific in terms of progress and growth. We have invested in standards-aligned curriculum and standards-aligned resources. So while we're in the second year of the 3-year plan that we started last year, I'm going to be realistic. Of course, we want to be 100% fully, every single classroom, 100% evidence implementation of standards-aligned instruction. Now, we want to be there. I can say next year, probably yes, we would say 100%. Right now, I'm going to say that 75%, we need to show evidence that 75% of our classrooms are truly standards aligned. And what I mean by that is that students with special needs have not had access to core curriculum. And we have new core curriculum now. And so we're still putting that together for our students with disabilities, and also ensuring that we have the actual access for our English learners through the very rigorous standards. So I'm going to put out 75%. Now, if the board wants 100%, you got it, because that's what I'm going to work towards. But I'm just trying to be realistic because our teachers are still in need of support. I want to also talk about, when we talk about progress and growth, we're not just talking about what we see as soon as you turn on that dashboard. We're talking about clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking until we see the root of where we are in our true achievement of progress and growth. That means we're looking at English learners for the first time, we're actually going to see now where we were from the foundation last year of the base. Now, how are we going to make progress for our English learners? It'll be the first time. And then in terms of our high school, now our 11th graders are being held accountable for their CASP results. And so now we have to change that mindset of, are we preparing our 11th grade students truly for these results? College and career readiness, I think you saw on a previous presentation, there's a lot of metrics for college and career readiness, and we're working on them. Our students with disabilities and our suspensions of our homeless and foster youth and African American students, those are the kinds of things that I want to see our district make progress and growth in. The second area of goals is about equitable access for all students, and that's a very, very large umbrella. So last year, we started the MTSS process, the multi-tiered system of support. And we don't want it, we tried last year to really focus on it's not another thing to do, but it's how we do our instruction, how we prepare our plans, how we support our students. And then we also went into child care, after school care, and making sure that our students had a place to go after school. So here's how we're going to go deeper this year. In our MTSS, we're really looking at Tier 1, which is everyone. Are we providing the alignment of not just our standards aligned instruction, but are we differentiating it for our students? We have a classroom of 32 students. Not all 32 students are at the same level. So we have to support our teachers. How do I make that difference of the groupings, those who get it, those who need more help and time, and those who are just like can work independently and move on? So we also, in Tier 1, we think about our ELD, our English Language Development, which actually our district is making good growth in because we focused on it. We put in the curriculum for it. We trained the teachers for it. Everybody's on board now, and we're seeing the growth on that. We're looking and focusing now on kindergarten through second grade because we were worried about that in eliminating the reading teachers. This is our focus for Tier 1 support in the kindergarten through second grade classrooms. And then we've heard before that we are doing district-wide positive behavioral intervention systems to get common language and common practice in our district for PBIS. The second one is about systemic programs. Now, this is a very big umbrella here. In terms of educational programs. So we're looking at not just after-school care. What we need to do better at is what kind of after-school intervention programs are we providing for our students? True intervention. And that means that it doesn't mean that it's the lowest performing, like the student who is like maybe 3 grade levels low. That may not be a particular intervention program we need. And it may be a different kind of intervention support where it's maybe through technology, where there's a librarian maybe who has their library open after school for an hour, who can give intervention support. So we're looking at strategic intervention after school at the same time of having after school care. We're looking at the least restrictive environment for co-teaching, for push-in, for inclusion. For these are all different educational programs and opportunities that our students need and can have. We will continue our dual immersion, but now is the time. We are at the point of dual immersion where we will start to see our dual immersion students now taking the state assessments. So they have been under instruction, primary instruction in Spanish, and now they're going to be switching over to the state assessment. So we're going to be seeing how we need to address whatever kind of supports they need there. We're rebranding Yolo High School. We will continue that. And what I mean by rebranding is that it's an alternative school. It's not a continuation permanent place. So the way to do that, we're looking at standards and light instruction there, making sure that they're collaborating with River City High School teachers. Now it may sound very easy, but it's not. It's not, because at Yolo High School, the instruction has to look different, and the support has to look different, and we need to make sure this system is there. So that's what we're looking at in terms of educational programs, and I know it's doable, and this is what our students need. My third goal has to do with the culture and climate. So you see last year's, and you see the difference of this year. Last year, we were in year 1 of the PLT time on Wednesdays. It's been going very well. This is about learning how to dance together, right? You put people together who haven't been collaborating before, and you put them together every week for an hour, and they're just learning how to dance together, and they're doing a great job. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. It doesn't mean that everybody agrees either, which I don't think they should agree. They should be talking through their disagreements and coming to a consensus of how to best serve our kids. So we're in year 2 of PLT time, but this year, what I'm looking to advocate for is to have classified staff stay on Wednesdays for professional learning time for their needs. So last year, we concentrated on teachers and administration, and I know that PLT time is not so called in the CSEA contract, but they're asking for help and support. And this is a way to do it. Everybody else is in PLT time. Thirdly, we want to increase parent education. I wish we could have gone to River City tonight, because River City tonight had a parent forum. And that's what we're talking about education. We're talking about opening our schools to bring parents together to talk about important issues that are real time. Tonight, River City had a parent forum on vaping and bullying, the different types of bullying. It was led by the administration with the SROs and the school nurses. Now that's parent education, because then we're directly helping our parents. And we want to see that, or I'd like to see that, across all our schools. I think whoever's watching the meeting right now, any principals are probably frantically taking notes. So, and then we are going to be in year 1 in addressing cultural relevance and implicit biases. And I'm excited for that. And I'm not going to pretend or sugarcoat that it's going to be an easy journey, because it will not be. But it's an important journey, because this is a culture. This is who we are as a people. And that is what will be sustainable for our district. So that is about culture and the climate of our goals. I also wanted to address, number 2, the safety. So it's great to have plans. We have good plans. We have really great plans. Yolo County, the grand jury, uses Washington Unified as the exemplar model for the other school districts to replicate. And I'm glad. But it's going deeper than that. We need to practice. We need to feel the urgency and not be complacent in this time in our country, in our state, and in our local society. So we are actually going to do tabletop exercises in collaboration with our law enforcement. That means that things are going to happen on the campus while the kids are on campus. We're going to exercise and do drills just as if it was happening with the students on the campus. We are doing a deeper level. We're training our classified staff. What is their role? So that is addressing the culture and climate of number 2. Lastly, my last area of goals is in regards to facilities. So I have to give a shout out to our chief business official, Chris Mount Benitez, who we just gave permission to aggressively address plans for facilities, and that's what we needed. We were afraid to talk about it for a long time, and I commend the board for talking about it, even under criticism, because it needed to be talked about. So now what we need to do is take this facilities master planning and really do it. And let's see what it says, because there's over 500 responses of what should be done. So I think that's why it's going to take 2 months for the person to put 500 responses together and categorize it to give the board a picture and some direction. But this facilities master planning is meant to be lived. It's a guide. You may change it along the way, and that's what it's meant for, is to be a guide. But it's not going to guide anything until we actually take action towards it. So in continuing that movement, I would put out that after we receive that summary in December, that we aggressively bring recommendations and allow the board to enter into conversations in regards to what's our first step. Now, I'll just say it because people may have a hard time about this, but a facilities master plan is meant for 5, 10, and 15 years, and it's for a reason. School districts have facility master plans long-term because it helps the public understand that this is where we have to be in the future, this is what we're projecting, and heads up, we're going to have this as a community. Our community is going to have to invest in this. That's how schools build schools. That's how schools modernize schools. We don't take it out of our general fund. We cannot do that. We cannot afford to do that. So we will continue that movement on our facilities. We are also going to continue what we started last year in discussion and are implementing this year, and that's the reorganization, making sure that we're using our current facilities efficiently and effectively. And so we will continue that work and updating the board. These are my overarching goals for this year, and it's going to be a busy year. But I am committed to the concept that there's no new concepts, that we just need to implement what we have put in place as systems and refine along the way. But we must keep going. We must have a sense of urgency in all of these areas to continue to grow Washington Unified. So I'm ready for your suggestions and feedback.
Before we go there, we have a public comment.
Okay,
if you
great.
would mind stepping aside. Ms.
Okay, thank
Danny
you.
Langford, I welcome you to the podium.
I know the superintendent said that this is part of her, what you will use as her evaluation criteria. I want to know if you will also, because the board has also come up with their, always in the past come up with their own criteria, like I've shown you guys before, with the number ratings. And my concern, and the goals are great. Goals are great. I'm not opposed to that. I use it in my own business. But if you're going to use some of these things to go behind closed doors and talk out of the public's eye, I think many of these things definitely need to not just be used as an evaluation, but they need to be discussed publicly like tonight has been discussed. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any comments or feedback for the goals? Trustee Kirby-Gonzalez? Vice President Pizzotti? He's pointing to you.
All right.
Trustee Kirby-Gonzalez, you first, Vice President Pizzotti, and then Clerk Jackson.
Okay, thank you very much for putting this together. It's an exciting time. There's a lot that's been happening and moving forward. And I think it's an exciting time, too, for people to take that breath that you talked about and to go deeper. And I know that when I have talked to staff on school sites, that has been one of the first things that they have reminded me of is no new things, we're going deeper. And so I really appreciate that. And I think that is the way to make the most impact with all the work that has been done, is to now really reflect on it and go through it. So I really applaud that. I think the point about 75% standards-aligned resources, it was brought up standard-aligned instruction, which I 100% am behind, and just a conversation of if that is, it was also said standards-aligned curriculum. We have standards-aligned curriculum, that's important, but if a teacher, that is a tool, and if they're using standards-aligned instruction first and foremost, then if they choose a different curriculum or piece for that day, I think that's great. I think 75% is very fair because not all of our schools have fully standard-aligned curriculum from the district in that science, social studies, things are coming for our younger kiddos. And so I think that was a very reasonable piece, just given that. And then my questions would be going forward is to just, before they happen, and to have some real conversations about what those table talk exercises mean. Because I know that I've seen, my own husband, as many people know, does these drills, and he just did one at a few of the high schools recently, not here in West Sacramento. And it was done on a weekend, and it was opt-in with students and families and community members. And it was for the officers to feel under pressure. There was training that went with it with the participants. And so I think that might be a starting place, the idea of a real feeling drill. If we're talking fire drills, absolutely, get out there and be ready, kids. But that just raised, for me, wanting to know a lot more about what that looks like, what that means, because I think we need to be very sensitive to our schools, our staffs, and our kids and how they're feeling. And then I think I really appreciate what you said, and I hear you about taking full responsibility with the dashboard at your level, but it's important for me to say that I wouldn't want the state tests to be used in a teacher evaluation, which I know you are not advocating for.
Right.
That's why I would also advocate that it wouldn't be used in yours. And so it is a single test. I have seen the tests, and I've signed a disclosure that I can't talk about the tests. But up here, I can say that if I had a child that wanted to opt out of the test, I would 100% do that. I don't think that it is nearly as valuable of all the things that are happening in our rooms every day and all the other measures that teachers use. So I understand that that's the game that we're in California, that there's the dashboard. But as somebody who sees that test intimately and watches students take it, and is not allowed to talk about it, that is the extent that I will say is I don't believe in that being a high stakes measure. I believe in it being a conversation, 100%. But in terms of a high stakes measure, I just don't. And then the point of dual immersion I want to bring up as well. There's a lot of research that shows that as students are learning, and parents are so happy in that program, I'm so grateful for it. But we need to recognize that first year they take that test, they have not been doing 90% English. And I would urge anyone to go online and take a practice test just to see that level of reading. So I think that we need to be very sensitive to that and not hold those students or that site to a certain standard regarding their test scores, because it's a very different program, and there's a lot of research that supports it might take a little bit longer for some of those skills to be fair. But thank you very much for this. I appreciate it, and I'm very excited for where we're going and what we're doing.
Vice President Pizzotti?
Yeah, I would concur with Trustee Kirby-Gonzalez about the dashboard being a part of your goals. It's great, it's laudable, but it shouldn't be a part of your evaluation in any way, shape, or form. We wouldn't ask that of our teachers. We're not going to ask that of you, or at least in my opinion, I don't think that's something we should be asking of you. Not to say that it isn't important. It is a conversation, sure. But it's not something that I would want to try and, evaluate your performance on based on that. And, again, she's right in the dual immersion classes at Elkhorn, they haven't had enough time to really show how much they've learned, how much they're able to, I guess, perform on one test on one day. To me, that's just not a good evaluation of where those students are. So, in my opinion, that's just, something we need to take into consideration. I do want to say that I am really glad to hear that we're looking at after-school programs as possible interventions. But I would also like to say that we need to look at maybe, as a goal, doing some after-school programs that are educational programs. so not just people that need interventions, but kids that need to flourish and grow and, get.
Enrichment.
Huh?
Enrichment.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, yeah.
So, I think that should be something that is a goal of all of ours, right? And then, of course, facilities. Thank you so much, so much for bringing this up. There's a lot of schools that need more work, that need a facelift, that need just a little tender loving care, that they've been neglected for too long, right? And then there's also, compaction in many of the areas of growth where we've seen growth over a decade, and yet no schools have been built. So we need to look at potentially easing that growth, and how are we going to be able to do that? So these are all parts of a conversation that we need to establish and figure out what we're going to do. But I think it's really time that we start looking at a bond and being serious about this conversation. I know you're trying to find the maximum amount of usage for the space that we have, Chris, but we have schools that are very, very crowded, even with the space that we have, and with the reorganization of the facilities that you've done has been exceptional. But we still need to think about what our future growth is and what we're going to do with that. And so with that, I would really love for us to start putting that on our radar, because that needs to happen, and it needs to happen soon, especially the faceless part and getting our schools that need some modernization done. Thank you.
Great. Clerk Jackson?
Few questions. Is that one, you had mentioned that this is the first year that 11th graders going to be held accountable for their CAP scores. How's that?
It's not that, I think it might be their second year. Is that correct, Dr. Parsons? 11th grade? It's the second year. That means that their ELA and math scores count in the district. Before the California exit exam, they were kind of out of it. It was all grades 3 through 8. Now we're back to grades 3 through 8 and grade 11.
Okay. And then we're talking about this standardized aligned resources and instruction in all classrooms. And actually, this was actually going to be a question for me. I'll probably have to save this one for later for Dr. Parsons, but I was wondering about the science curriculum.
Yeah, it's coming this year. It's piloting this year. The Curriculum Council is piloting it, and so they'll be bringing a recommendation to the board later this year. I think that's one of the first topics, I believe, at the first council meeting. Yeah.
Are we just piloting just the one, or are we piloting multiple? Because I know at my school, we're actually piloting 2.
Yeah, usually we pilot a couple and then they make a recommendation. Is that correct?
Yes, grades 6 through 8 are piloting 2, starting next week, and then the high school is piloting 1 at this point. And we will be presenting them at the end of October Curriculum Council.
And then for the intervention programs for the after-school intervention after-school programs for students, is there something in particular that you had in mind, or what would be a measurable for something like that?
I think what would be a measurable would be to have the schools enter into a process of identifying what the needs are of that particular school, because I think each school will have different needs in different areas. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would like to put in place is a systemic process across the district of not only identifying the needs of the students, but here's what our research or performance proven programs, whether it's a technology or just the teacher doing short-term intervention. So sometimes when we think about intervention, a lot of it's homework help. We have to get away from that. It's not about homework help. If we have 20 students in grades 3 through 6th grade that all need help with fractions, then those grades 3 through 6 should be coming together for an 8-week period solely focusing on fractions. Now, to me, that's strategic intervention. We have nothing like that here in place. I would love to create that systemic process across the district and allow the principals with their teachers to determine what kind of interventions are needed and not make it long-term, but make it very intensive for that short period of time so that then you can roll through other students with other needs.
Right, okay. And then we're talking about the MTSS practice or Tier 1 supports. Because I know throughout the district we have various smatterings of PBIS that's in varying stages. Is there a plan to maybe kind of to bring everyone, to get everyone on the same level so that we can kind of start pulling together versus having different places pulling in different directions?
Yeah, that one's going to be a tough one of gathering us all together to get onto the same level. We're trying to honor like specific schools that have done best, and most of the teachers have been trained in best, which I understand is very similar to PBIS. We want to honor that, and if it is working well in their school, we want to make sure then that we support how they do that. The situation that we have to address on that is common language, common practice. And so we're in the beginning stage of true PBIS training through the County Office of Education, and it's actually through Placer County, which it is one of the 2 best models in the state of California. And we're very fortunate about being able to be in that partnership. Now, Yolo County is going to be paying for the initial trainers model, which we're grateful for all 5 of our school districts in Yolo County. From there, the Yolo County office, the trainers, after they've been trained for 4 days, will come into the school districts and do the training for staffs. So we're going to do the trainers, and then that team will come into the school district to give training. I think we're still wrestling with how do we honor schools that have done a lot of training and best, and then some schools have had no training whatsoever.
Superintendent Luna?
So, yes.
I did talk to Placer County yesterday, and they were the ones who did the best training.
Oh, that's even more.
And so they said it's very similar, and they know our schools very well.
That's even more perfect for it, so.
Okay, and then so then in that situation, then what can we look for in terms of a measurable for that?
I think after we receive the training, then we'll be able to build the template of how will we know we're successful, who will be trained first, and what will we look for to see success indicators. I'm not trained in PBIS, so I'm going to go to the training at the school so I can then support better. And so it's hard for me to answer that because I haven't gone through the training.
Right.
But that's how I would approach it, is once the trainers model is done in those 4 days, I will ask the county office, what are you measuring for success in our district? And then we will take that to make it a little bit deeper by site and more applicable for us.
I was under the impression over the years we've been using CHKS.
That's
measure,
the
so
Healthy
that's
Kids Survey.
correct,
It
but
kind of
there's-
gives a guidance as to what area to look for,
Right,
but
but that's
PB,
a me- that's a
yeah,
measurement.
it's one of the measurements.
Okay, so, I mean, that is one of the measurements over
Yeah.
time that we've actually identified, so I also know that we spoke about that during your evaluation, and CHKS was,
Yeah.
so just wanted to.
So
put
that
out
would be
there.
a great success indicator. Another would be our suspensions. Another would be how many actual true restorative practice processes have been implemented. I think those are very applicable for our schools and our district.
Yeah. And I honestly, I love the idea of the professional learning for the classified staff. I think that's a highly overlooked aspect when it comes to trainings in schools, is that a lot of times, I think the impression is that the teachers are the ones that need to be trained in certain areas, like that. When our classified staff all the way from the cafeteria, people that are
Right.
in the cafeteria, all the way down to the plant managers and to our bus drivers. Yeah, and instructional aides, those are all people who need to be brought up to speed because, they spend just as much time and a lot of times even more quality time, a lot of more one-on-one time with students than a lot of the teachers do. So I think that's when you said that, I wrote that down, and that was a big yes for me because I think that's something that is definitely highly overlooked. I would actually, and when you talk about the increased parent education, I think probably something that I believe that's probably overlooked. A lot of parents may feel left out is I think that I don't know if we do enough to get enough feedback from our parents in the community. So I know if we're going to use the Healthy Kids survey for the students, we can also have a survey that we can, and we should be using the parent survey at the end of every year.
Right.
So to give our parents an opportunity to give us feedback on how the school year went for them, what are the areas that they can notice and things like that. How can we improve from their point of view?
Correct.
As
No,
well.
that's great. Okay, thank you.
And then the other one, I think when you talked about the tabletop drills.
Yes, the exercises.
Yeah, the exercises. I just remember when the fallback and backlash that we got, what was that, a month ago, when there was that unannounced drill at River City and parents went just bonkers because the kids didn't know what was going on, which I'm perfectly fine with that. As a teacher, I actually don't mind having drills, unannounced fire drills and unannounced intruder drills and things like that, because that's the only way you truly know how you're prepared or not.
Right.
And so personally, I don't have a problem moving forward with that if there's just a way that we can maybe kind of mitigate that.
Yes.
So that parents aren't necessarily, they're not getting these frantic texts from their children because, oh my God, we're having such and such drill. If before we know that it's going to happen, and maybe just 2 minutes before it goes off at the schools, just sending a notification to the parents, hey, we're going to be going to conducting a drill. In case you get a text message from your children, this is just the drill, to kind of be a little bit more preemptive. So even that way, when the kids start texting their parents, even though they're not supposed to have the phones out in school,
Right.
as they text their parents, the parents can then let them know, hey, don't worry about it, it's just the drill, we already know, type of deal. To kind of get ahead of, maybe trying to get ahead of that.
That's a
to
great
create
suggestion.
Prevent that.
Yes. I think that was actually one of the first things that came out of the debrief of that particular incident. Yeah, so thank you for that.
And honestly, like I said, I personally didn't have a problem with it. I think it's good. It keeps you on your toes.
Yep, otherwise it's intentionally done that.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
So, first and foremost, thank you for actually incorporating all of our feedback that we provided you in your evaluation, just to close that loop and for transparency, everything that you have mentioned, the classified staff, all of that. I just wanted to be very clear that these are not new goals, but part of that, your evaluation, goal-setting progress, and this is a conversation, and for the public, if the public needs to know that this has been that conversation, and what you put forward wasn't just you on your own, but it was actually digesting our feedback during your evaluation and incorporating in this. So I know that's a hard thing to do when you have 5 different voices and us writing all these different things, saying that you must do this. I appreciate that my colleagues talking about us not evaluating you against the performance of students, but with that said, we did highlight and prioritize that that's the only way that we're going to actually understand subgroups. Right, whether or not we are teaching one, being more strategic and teaching one group over another, whether or not we're suspending one group over another. So quite frankly, it is a conversation, but the data needs to be somewhere for us to determine whether or not there's a differential in teaching, if we're leaving anybody out, right, special education, et cetera. So I just want to put that out there. The data is not necessarily about performance, and I've always said that. It's actually an iterative process, and that we need to get better, right? And that's part of the growth mindset that I appreciate you kind of leading with, that it's about growth mindset, right? It's not just the number isn't just the end goal.
Right.
It is, okay, like who are we missing? Why is this student group performing at this level? And that English language, if you hadn't looked at the data, we wouldn't have known that our English language learners were providing a different type of instruction than others.
Correct.
Right. So that's a highlight of that conversation, and I know that was part of our evaluation conversation as well. The purpose of the dashboard and everything is actually about trying to kind of figure that out, that we want all of our students to perform at high levels.
Correct.
But we just need to target our resources accordingly.
Yes.
Right. So
Thank you for that feedback.
yeah, I wanted to put that out there. And where, I agree with the California Healthy Kids Survey. I know that there are other tools that we should actually be looking at, looking forward to seeing what PBIS is going to come out with. But definitely, that is another kind of, questionnaire that we should look at, not just the dashboard, because it's about feelings and whether or not our kids are using alcohol or like using drugs or vaping. I think we want to know that at certain levels. Right, percentages at each school, whether or not they feel safe, whether or not there's, they feel discriminated against, right? So I think that's actually another data point that we should be actually taking a deeper dive into as we're developing our MTSS. And the educational enrichment is absolutely a good part, and I just want to kind of, because this wasn't mentioned, but we keep on including this, and I'm learning this, is that athletics is part of that conversation. That's right. Right, kind of examining the athletics as part of enrichment. I'm learning, I'm hearing that it's a priority of the community, prioritize of my board members, those who apparently played, all of you who played sports. Badminton is a sport in high school. I just want to. And people can letter in badminton.
They can actually.
They tend to look like me.
Thank you. I have added athletics to that after school. Thank you.
So some people said they didn't know that you could letter in such a thing. So in any case.
You can letter, really?
Yes.
Yes.
Shut up.
You can literally let, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Your board president did letter in badminton. It is possible. You play enough varsity games, you get a letter.
I was a band student, so
Okay.
I wasn't allowed to play sports.
Reeling it back
so-
reeling it back in. I know we're being lighthearted about this, and we need to get to the action items. We're still only in discussion.
No.
So, the tabletops, I want to learn more about it. I understand there's the pros and cons about notifying public, not public, but I also want to know that, our TK5 fifth graders, in all transparency, that stuff scares my daughters, and they have nightmares. And so we need to do that. Think about it differently for elementary school kids.
Yeah, most
right?
definitely.
Because they think someone's going to break into our home because of this, right? And whether or not someone's going to shoot them in their own home.
Yeah.
So I think that's an unpacking that you need to do at developmentally appropriate age and language about how that happens. And so I just put it out there. But even my home, it's like, what do you mean we live in a very safe home? But then there's that after effect of running all those drills all the time with kids, right? And so just wanting to put that out there, that not only the parents at the high school, but the little ones, are
It's a different kind
It's
of,
a different
yes.
type of conversation.
And I think I will clarify, I can clarify that now, that the tabletop exercises are more for adults. In other words, we have our partners there at the table, and they put a scenario in front of us, our partners meaning fire, police, whatever the scenario is, and it's really about talking through it. What would we do? Where do we go? Where's this command center set up? So it's really about the adults who are identified to know exactly what to do, because during a time of emergency or crisis, it's really difficult to think clearly because you're in an emergency or you're in a crisis. So that's why we practice and talk through the reasoning of why a specific center needs to be placed here, or another center needs to be placed here. And it may be in the emergency plan, but when it comes down to an emergency, the fire department and law enforcement are going to make the calls of where the true centers are going to be on the campus. And it may be moved according to how the scenario plays out. So it's really about the adult training. We don't want to scare our kids. And
Some of them are already scared.
Yeah, exactly, right, because of what they hear and even
And the
what they've
drills.
experienced and what they see. So it's really, tabletop exercises are really about the adults who are assigned responsibilities and how to walk through that and walk through quickly with a sense of urgency. So thank you for letting me clarify that, because I don't want to cause any anxiety towards that. It already is anxiety-filled just with that word,
Yeah,
tabletop
no, absolutely.
So-
But I also had to, kind of the flip side, appreciate that we're running the drills, but there is also some unpacking to do with our babies.
Yes, thank you.
And facilities, thank you again, part of our goals, the 5, 10, 15-year. Whether or not it's a local bond, we also have a state bond in March that we could be eligible for if we have all our ducks in line. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a local city bond at this point. There are other state bonds that we could be eligible for, but we need to have the plans ready. We are positioned in a place, and I think I said this in the last board meeting, because of our concentration grant and a number of percentage points, we actually are one of the winners in the, the state bond kind of reforming that, so.
The only thing I would say, just so that we don't get our hopes up too high on it, is that there are so many school districts who have already front-loaded the building a brand-new school, such as an example would be a large district like Elk Grove School District, who has, let's say, built 3 brand-new campuses, and they're already in that line because they've already built them, and they're going to have to, they won't be getting the percentage that they had always hoped for, but we do need to have the plan in place in order to be a part of that line.
Yeah.
So this master plan is really going to help move us to a better place, statewide and in our local area too.
What I appreciate about the new brand is they're getting rid of the first in, first out. The queue is no longer there, and it's so the emphasis is, it will be different. There'll be a different queue with a different subgroup, but some of the queue will be different. Oh,
Yeah.
queue for people who are in, the line will be different.
The line, yes.
Sorry, the queue.
Everybody's waiting for that money.
The queue. So I think with the reform, we've actually jumped ahead of the line, the queue, if you will. So that's it. Any other discussion? So again, I'm just going to reiterate, thank you for taking our feedback to heart in your evaluation and incorporating that in your goals moving forward.
Great.
So
Thank you
we're
very
off
much,
to a good
Board.
start.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. So we are moving on to a public hearing. Dr. Parsons, sufficiency of instructional materials, the Williams Act.
Good evening, President Wong, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Luna, the community, and our cabinet. Tonight, adhering to California Education Code Section 1240C2G, pursuant to the Williams Settlement, Washington Unified School District is required to hold a public hearing to ensure that all students have sufficient textbooks or instructional materials in the core areas, reading, language arts, mathematics, science, and history, social science. We had 4 of our schools that were visited. One was Elkhorn on September 4th, Riverbank on September 4th, Stonegate and Westfield Village on September 5th. The visiting team found that there was no insufficiencies of instructional materials or textbooks. Additionally, there were no uniform complaints during the 2018-19 school year. So tonight, and public notice was published as required, so we're asking the board to hold a public hearing as required by law.
Okay, so we're having a public hearing. We're closing are there any questions? I'm assuming there are no questions. Okay, we're closing it.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to consent agenda items. We did last minute to move anything off the consent agenda items?
Yeah,
Nope.
actually, I do have one.
Oh, okay.
Of course. You knew I did.
Clerk Jackson, I know you were looking for it.
I know, I was looking for it earlier. Hold on. Where's it? 010,
010,
Yeah,
so that
just-
is, the roofing project.
the roofing project.
We'll move that down to action item. So any other modifications to the consent agenda as people are flipping through? Nope. Vice President Pizzotti, you're flipping through?
No, I was just reading 010 again.
Okay, do I
Okay.
have a motion to?
Can I make a comment, though? I just wanted to point out that 09 is actually, even though it's a change order, it's one of those good change orders for us. So,
Okay. Thanks. Do I have a motion?
A motion to approve the
I'll second.
consent agenda with the change.
Okay, so moved by trustee Kirby Gonzalez, seconded by clerk Jackson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. So approved with O10 moving to action. Moving on to P1, now it's an action item for Dr. Parsons, the adoption of Resolution 1920-03, sufficiency of instructional materials, Williams Act.
We do request approval of the resolution number 1920-03 after our public hearing regarding sufficiency of instructional materials.
So moved.
Any, after robust discussion on the item, do we have a, Vice President Pizzotti moves, but it's like second chance to have more discussion.
Second.
Okay. Trustee Gonzalez, seconds. So this is a resolution, so it's a roll call vote. So Vice President Pizzotti?
Here.
Trustee Kirby Gonzalez?
Aye.
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 And I too vote aye. I don't know, after I spoke about badminton, we're a little bit loopy. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. P2, approval of the service of Facilitron for district facility use requests. Welcome, ladies, and
Hello again,
Mount-
trustees and colleagues and
So
community
like
members.
big
We have a
jumbotron?
very brief presentation, just so that folks aren't confused. We've talked a lot about facilities master plan, and this is facilities use program, so it is different. We've done a lot of automation throughout the district, concentrating on our operations over the past year, and this is another step in that process. And so we have a group here this evening to briefly present to you about Facilitron. And the reason that we're doing this as a presentation and action item, even though there's no direct cost to the school district, and it's just an operational change, is that with an operational change of this type in a district our size, it is certainly something that trustees as well as administration will hear about, because what this does is it moves our current paper and pen-based facilities use process to being a web-based electronic automated process. The process of passing paper is still available for the public members that would like to engage in that process through the MOT department. However, the presentation this evening will present to the board the option that we've selected as the best one for ourselves, and I believe Angie Nichols is with us this evening as well if we have any questions for Angie, but we have two folks from Facilitron that are going to do a brief presentation for you.
Thanks, Chris.
Sure. And this should be
Get
all
me
set to
through.
go.
Is this
Yeah.
before and back?
There we go.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you.
And I'll be right behind you if you need anything.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, board members, trustees, President Wong, and I think we've lost Superintendent Luna, but thank you. Okay. So my name is Claire Pazinski. This is Grace Foat. We are account managers with Facilitron. So what is Facilitron, besides a really interesting name? It is a facility management online platform that brings community and district to one spot. So how do we do this? We look at solutions globally. And so when we look at solutions globally, we've learned that when we can bring cataloging of all of your facilities to one spot, we make that easier for community members. Shall I continue?
You're
Okay.
good. Yeah,
Community
keep going.
members and district site users as well. So we know this when we have all of your facilities cataloged. We have every facility now, once it's cataloged, can be booked from the community or booked from your internal staff and show itself all on a master calendar. We know that at any moment, anyone can see what's being utilized on that master calendar. We know that we see the community and district use as a separate entity. We know the community wants to go in and see facilities. Will it be able to house their event that they're looking for? We know that for the site and districts, they really want to be able to go in and get the work done. And so we know that if we can get all of this on our platform or on a platform, we know that then we can also aggregate data. We have data to then start moving us forward with choices and decisions in cost analysis, or not cost analysis, I'm so sorry, on just powerful analysis on policy review to keep community and district moving forward together. So how do we do this? So we have, here's the two ways that a user gets on Facilitron. If you are a community member, we have a community portal. So this shows you very quickly, I can take off my glasses, all facilities in on a site. So you can see that, and when I say a site, I mean we go in, we create, we digitize, or we take pictures of, I'm a little nervous, I'm so sorry, of all of your facilities, and you can see instantly how big it is, what it holds, what facilities what amenities it allows. On the district or school site side, you have master calendars, you have a way to connect to your custodial staff instantly. You can connect back to the renter instantly. You can communicate between district and site and Facilitron. So this is a typical way that your community sees your sites. So this is actually a district site. So we highlight the district. We have that, what I call a ticker tape view of all of your school sites. A community member can click on those images and drop right into that school site's main page. Or a community member can look or fill in that facility use field. And if they type in, for instance, gym, every gym pops up that's available in the community. This is an actual page where a community member looks at. So here's where they can pick time, day. They can see how the capacity of the space, does it have all the amenities they're looking for? And that really streamlines the process. Now it's all digital. They go in, they can select it. That instantly, once they click submit, that goes right to everybody that's involved. District, school site, custodial staff, that's how you want it to flow.
Okay. So let's talk about the district benefits. So with using one centralized calendar, the district has complete oversight over what is happening at each of our campuses, right? So we aggregate all of our school site information and we put it on one district view calendar. Okay, so by managing and by tracking all of this information on one central location, we're actually preventing conflicting events from happening among school and community groups, right? Okay. So, and by the way, the final bullet point here is we have the ability to push this master Facilitron calendar to Google. So district personnel, school site personnel can now access this information on any device. Okay. Community benefits. So now a community organization can actually jump online and go look for, in real time, what facilities are available. Okay, so that's huge. So with this transparent process, the checkout process and the request for facilities use process, it's like Claire was saying, the photos, the pricing, everything is transparent on that facility page that she showed. Right now. So this is streamlining the process for community members to book facilities, right? Very community friendly, community convenient. The last item on that page, while Claire goes back to the slide, it's just important to note here. Thank you. Yeah. We're gonna stick. So I'm just gonna summarize the last bullet item on that page. Facilitron has a customer support team. So renters are no longer having to communicate with the school or the district to ask questions about a facility. Instead, we are fielding the questions on behalf of district administration. Okay. So along those lines, Claire and I represent the account management team with Facilitron. So each district that we bring on board has a designated account manager, likely Claire. Okay. So what we do day to day is we ensure that we work with the district to understand how are our facilities being utilized. Okay. So by collecting utilization data, we can now start to look at what the data is telling us. And for example, if 2 gyms, at your middle schools are being used, one's being used over another, right, with more hours than the other. Now we can start to maybe prioritize refurbishments based on utilization data. Okay? At the same time, we're also tracking renter information. So by gathering renter details, we can now ensure equitable use of our community spaces. Okay. This last slide is just really a summary of the gamut of support that you get when partnering with Facilitron. So like Claire said, we come out and we inventory all of your facilities. We do the complete setup process, okay? That includes training of all district personnel, anybody who's going to be involved in the approval process in facilities use, okay? And then it gets passed to account management and customer support. So we are an extension of district administration, district staff, and we work with you for that final box, the business analysis. Now we've got the data in front of us. For the very first time ever, we're seeing utilization data in real time, and we start to share best practices. What are other districts doing around facilities use, and how are we applying this data to enforce our policies and better them? So that is everything that we wanted to present to you. And with that, we welcome any questions, comments, feedback from the community and the board.
Great. Vice President Pizzotti has been waiting patiently to ask his first question. So.
I'm trying to picture this, and is this something similar to like a VRBO of facilities?
Right. Yeah. So if you want,
legitimately, that's like the analogy I would use, right?
yes. Correct. If you wanted our true elevator pitch, it would be, we are the Airbnb.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Is it the Airbnb or something? But so now, in terms of the money that is being brought in, we can now track and put that into a system or one complete report account for all facilities instead of having to pull from each site. Okay, so then this might be a question for Chris in terms of the resources needed in order to do all that pulling on, in terms of tracking all that information to figure out how much are we saving or how much are we getting in terms of revenue versus, what it costs us to actually do that kind of compiling, the data compiling that we do. My question on this is going to be like, what's the cost benefit analysis on this? Like what your transaction fee is or your service fee is versus what does it cost us to actually do it versus, this seems to be pretty awesome in the sense that it ties it up in a nice, neat little bow for us and says, here's your data, Chris. I'm guessing that is a big time savings for you, right?
It would be if we were doing any of that. So,
okay, well, there's a problem too.
So that's the solution, right?
Okay,
So as you might have noticed, I tend to bring a lot of data and reporting and that type of thing to the board, and I get very frustrated with this fairly small minor aspect of our business that because we are passing paper, literally hard copy paper still from desk to desk, to ask how we're tracking it and evaluating it would require that we actually find all those papers.
Evaluate it?
And then, sit there and jot down the data and find somebody that can sit there and do all that data entry so that we can even begin to do an analysis. And the reality is, with the size of the operations team that I have, that doesn't occur. So it not only will save us time and automate something so that the process is the same for everybody, which is also an issue that we've had, right? Regardless of where they are, who they're trying to engage with, but then it starts to produce the data that I've been looking for so that I can actually have those answers, and not just answers, but data to support the answers.
Well, and it also lets people know that these facilities are actually available for use.
Correct. So there is an exposure, there is a PR, right. But the other thing is notice that the complete setup component, so the Facilitron does charge a fee. It's a fee to the people booking the facility at a percentage basis that's added on to the use.
Hour-based use.
And it already pays for, because we've given them what it needs to pay for, our hourly custodial and all those other components that the board has said that folks need to pay for. But look at that first box. Besides the data, it gives us all of that information on a public website for ourselves as well. So here's the other part. It's for the public. It also is for us, right? So imagine having all of that data on all of our facilities. Currently, we don't have that.
Right. I'm sold.
You have a question? Yeah. Trustee Kirby Gonzalez, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited about how easy this is to navigate. I just pulled up Rockland, which is one of our folks in the close vicinity, and looked up how to do their facility use through you. And it's so incredibly easy, just as your screen showed us. And so I think that's exciting. Regarding the data, I have heard from people who have been trying to use district facilities who've run into a lot of frustrations. Did somebody see my paperwork? I don't know. I haven't heard back. So I think this addresses exactly what our district needs in terms of being able to communicate really efficiently with folks. And I know, so my two questions are, you talked about the fees being paid for by the vendor or by whoever's signing up. So let's say I want to run my Girl Scout meeting at my neighborhood school. And as a Girl Scout, I'm a nonprofit. So what will that look like in terms of the fee for this service compared to our fees that are on our table?
So for, we really follow your direction. So for nonprofits, you tell us what that rate is, and then the service fee is on top of that, like Chris was saying. I know in Rockland, they don't charge their PTA groups or their Boy Scout, Girl Scout groups.
Yeah.
So they really only pay ever for anything is custodial if they have those larger events.
Yes.
So there really would be no fee for that nonprofit group. Now, if it's another nonprofit group that is operating as, say, one of your soccer leagues,
sure,
that is the fair market. That's the fair nonprofit price. That then again, our fee will go on top of that, and the end user or the community member does see that fee as a service fee.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't going to be an exorbitant change with anyone.
Now, I do want to emphasize that we take your board policy and your board-approved rates, and that's what we mean, the complete setup.
Gotcha.
We take everything you have, your policies, your rate table, we implement that. We're not making any substantive change.
Correct.
Okay.
Then we start to look at the data and revisit those conversations.
Perfect.
But not until we have enough data.
Okay, good. That's really helpful. I think because I heard even, and I know we have a Stonegate parent here today, that Stonegate canceled one of their after-school classes today with a vendor that's been used for years because of a facility issue. So I think that there's, I've been hearing from parents about these concerns. And so I think that this is a really exciting way to address that. And just going on the website, I'm really impressed by this. So thank you to our staff for bringing this forward, and thank you for your presentation.
Clerk Jetson?
Yeah, actually, one of my questions has already been answered, because I was going through the contract, and I did notice that there was the fee, and that's already been explained. So obviously, there would be a small increase in our facility use fees than what we currently have, because they have to pay the fee that's currently you're being asked for. And Chris, you may want to jump on this too. To me, when looking at this, is kind of see this mirrors on the kind of along the lines of what was the contract that we approved for transportation
VIA.
over the summer? Yeah, the VIA. What was it, the VIA one?
It was the pilot program for $25,000.
No, it was the one. Nate, because I remember Nate came in and he gave us a presentation on it, and he said, "Hey, this is going to help." Yeah, maybe it was the VIA one where it helped us be able to communicate with the transportation stuff like that.
Yep.
Is this then something kind of along the same lines as far as facilities, where we'd be able to kind of track what's being used, how much is being used, and maybe when things need to be repaired and replaced and things like that in terms of facilities?
Difference is that this is actually no cost to the district, right? So
Right, I understand
so
that.
the cost is borne by the people wanting to use the facility, and it does show up as a service fee, so it does break it out separate from the board-approved use fees. And then of course, if I'm a community member and I say I don't want to pay that $6.95 for the service fee, I still have the option of driving over to MOT, filling all the paperwork out. But this also means that it's automated as far as verifying their 401 or 501c3 status, their insurance for the requirements of the board. So all that becomes automated, and it's no longer a human process, which takes a lot of time.
Right. I guess I wasn't necessarily referring to the fee, but I'm talking about the data that's collected. Would that help us then be able to determine what maintenance may be coming up and due and things like that?
Because you'll see actual numbers, you'll see the actual usage, the times, and you'll see what facility gets utilized the most. And we know those are going to be our gyms, our stadiums, our fields, but you can really, you'll actually see that in real time, in real hours.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's basically bringing us into the, whatever, 21st century?
Yeah.
Can you remind us your percentage of the fee, just for the public who's watching?
Yes, so it's a scale. So I believe it is, I'm so sorry,
If
but.
you want, you can grab this one. Do you want me to?
Yeah, because
Okay.
it's from 500 to,
Sure.
right.
So we have two payment options. One
Okay.
is a sliding scale of 8 to 12%, and that's per transaction where there actually is a dollar amount assigned. The other payment option is a flat fee.
And we choose that, or?
We would choose
I guess
that.
I'm-
We would choose
Okay,
that.
we choose that. And how is the flat fee determined?
The flat fee, so the flat fee would be that 12%.
Okay, flat fee is just, okay, interesting, okay.
And so most districts do choose that sliding scale.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense. And I just want to be clear that, yeah, I recently looked at our facilities because I was looking for something. It is zero for nonprofits and a couple of other things based on our board policy. But, so you're not going to put a fee on top of the 2 hours of janitorial. It's just, it's the facilities amount that you're attaching a fee to.
If you don't charge a specific group currently, we won't charge that
The
group.
fee, okay. So, but we do charge them for janitorial services.
And that service would.
Not be-
That would be commission,
That would be commission.
correct.
So they are paying for so, okay, so that's not true then. So even the nonprofits who are zero fee right now will get charged.
Correct.
Okay, so
If
that was
that's-
different from the
So
understanding.
no, it won't show
They have
as a
to-
charge.
Like our policy
to-
requires the custodial. So our policy actually requires a 2-hour minimum, even if you're a nonprofit, right? 2-hour minimum custodial, which is a cost. So you're saying that it's actually not, it's just a percentage of that custodial.
Correct,
Okay?
correct.
I think that that was an assumption that, oh, no, it's gonna be free. It's not free. It's actually not free right now for nonprofits because we have to pay for the custodial fee.
Okay.
The other thing I had is that there are principals and games, and so that it's somehow we're gonna integrate all those, and so it will still require humans on those campuses to actually book out.
Yes, correct.
To book out those calendars, and so get on that one calendar. So
while-
I just want to understand that too from our operations side.
So while we automate a lot of the process, it's still going to take somebody to oversee the management and the use of facilities, right? So we're not here to replace a human. We're here
Right.
at any school site or the district.
Yeah.
Still, but we're
Okay.
freeing that person up to make decisions based on all this aggregation.
Because the example that my colleague used is that, was it the prioritize the school, or was it a facilities use thing? Not sure. So again, there needs to be some humans on that campus to actually upload whether or not a gym's being used, or for a harvest festival that can't be utilized for something else.
So part of the setup process is actually grabbing all of your existing calendars and implementing, putting it into
All of our
Facilitron.
PTO calenders and all
Exactly.
the
Your
other
athletic
non-PTO
schedules,
calendars and enrichment.
Everything.
Correct.
So we take your existing information and we put it onto Facilitron so that you're not having to double that work.
And then moving forward from that, then those key players in those groups would then start putting them on, and we would train them how.
Yeah, no, it's just for transparency, because I think some campuses and PTOs are used to kind of just operating.
Yep.
And there's a
So-
lot of transparency. So to that point, we would know what happened. We would, because at that point, there's a lot of communication between us, between facility, between site, and so our site and us. And so we would catch that before there was a drop.
Any other questions? Just, I think a lot of parents have questions about it because they've been used to using facilities without fees in some cases.
Just thinking this out loud is, if it, for staff, if we look at our fees and what it is with the this added sliding scale, which I would advocate for, if it's not, Rockland's just one I pulled up, and maybe there's other districts too nearby, just making sure that we are somewhere kind of in that range. If it looks like this bumps us up further, then maybe it's a conversation we bring back here to look at our fees. So that would just be my comment, is that we just make sure that we're still in line after we look at what this says to our
It ends up
costs.
being an extra $8
Yeah.
for nonprofits if they're doing the 2 hours.
Yeah, it seems very
Off the
reasonable.
top of my head, rounded.
And I'm sure that's what then it would look like in the other districts too. So just like the first time when we did facility use payments, we looked at other districts, so just throwing that out there. I don't need to see it again if it's close in line, but.
Actually, I think that a policy committee is going to be up soon and talk about facilities, so maybe we'll, the policy subcommittee will address that. Okay, so, so do we have a motion to adopt?
Do.
Or-
Second.
Okay, Vice President Pizzotti moves, Clerk Jackson seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hey, guess what? It's Chris again.
It is. I'm sorry to
Approval
say
of
that
unaudited
was.
actuals, financial report, fiscal close,
Yeah.
fiscal year 2018-19.
Great. 1 second.
We still need to talk to labor.
Trustees, I like to bring it up on my laptop as well. So I have a very brief presentation for you about our unaudited actuals. Of course, the second to the last financial report for the 18-19 school year. And of course, we bring back the audited actuals for 18-19 in December, as well as our first interim for the 19-20 school year. So that'll be that next step. So, of course, at any given time, business services is always operating on the prior fiscal year, which is about tonight's presentation, 18-19. We're managing the current year and we're planning the next year. And so we always try to keep in mind which year we're talking about. So again, this is the second to last report on 18-19. And one of the things that's nice to see is comparing the summary of the report for all of our revenues and expenditures. The projected revenues you're seeing tonight were after our second interim report in March, so after all the work we had done, versus where we actually ended the year and closed the books at the end of the June. The variance that we tend to look for is anything larger than 1% of total revenues or expenditures, and then in any single category, larger than 10%. To give people an idea of what 1% is, particularly when we're talking about the unrestricted general fund, 1% is $763,000 because our unrestricted general fund annually is at $76 million. Just big picture, estimated actuals. You have in the left-hand column revenues versus expenditures. This is all in the unrestricted general fund. The excess or deficiency, and then other net, which is what we'll get into. That's what we always talk about a little bit more in detail on this report. And then the anticipated change in fund balance. So as of the end of March this past year, the estimated actuals are in that left-hand column, and then you can compare them to where we actually ended up by the time we closed the books, and you can look at the variance. So you can see total revenues, the variance was only a little over $13,000, very, very close. Total expenditures, we actually were about $1.4 million different, estimated versus where we actually ended up spending. And then the excess deficiency, where we were coming out of that unrestricted fund net position, and then the contributions and transfers. Contributions and transfers are two things. So contributions is where we move money from the unrestricted general fund to the restricted fund side, contributing to specific programs, because we have to make sure that those programs are at worst net zero by the end of the year, meaning that they have a zero balance moving into the next year. And of course, a transfer, it's the same concept, but we're moving money out of the general fund to a different fund that is required by law to be set up for the school district. So, in big picture, so where did we contribute this year? Contributions from unrestricted to restricted general fund were mostly in three areas. Special education, nearly $6.8 million this past year. RRM, or routine and restricted maintenance, which of course we're required to track and make sure that we are doing a minimum of 3% contribution a year. We contributed nearly $2.8 million to RRM from the unrestricted to the restricted side. And then debt service. So that number changes every year depending upon how much we need after we get in things like, our developer fees. And so you can see that our debt service required that we contribute $610,000 from the general fund to service our internal debt this past year. Transportation's a little different. We always tell the board and report out how much it cost from the general fund to run transportation. We got very few dollars to run our transportation department. We still run a comprehensive transportation department, and so this is the amount that it cost from the general fund to run district-wide transportation. That's all transportation, that's extracurricular and everything.
I think we always get this question, can you explain debt service and what are we paying back? Because I don't know if it's a debt that was created by this board, it's a debt service.
Correct.
I feel like every time it comes up, it's not necessarily something that this board adopted, it's a debt service too.
Right. So the debt service is the amount of money that we have to contribute from the general fund to pay our installment payments on various loans that were taken out in the past. This includes at this time COPs, which stands for Certificates of Participation. Those were taken out and used to expand our Southside K-8 schools to be K-8, as well as to complete the building of the high school. The total COP debt taken out by the district was, we're gonna call it $70 million. That's the rough number. And then of course there's a CREB, Clean Renewable Energy Bond, as well as a QSCAB, also for renewable energy. That's actually, those were both used for solar, and you have those details in the solar report this evening. But our debt service for all of those items, every year what we do is we take in all of the developer fees as well as redevelopment agency fees. This is getting a little wonky, but those are all those revenues that we get in.
Because I think a lot of questions have a question about the developer fees and why they're
Right,
not
so we get all of that in, and we have to put 100% of that towards paying those loans, and then whatever amount we're short between getting all of those fees in and paying the loans, we have to contribute from the general fund. So last year, that contribution was about $800,000. This year, it's $610,000. It fluctuates because, of course, every year the amount of developer fees that we get in to pay that debt service goes up and down depending upon how much development is going on, and we have to make up the excess from our general fund.
Do we have an idea of when all that debt service will be paid off?
2039.
Jesus.
Okay, so even with all, I mean, again, this is just, I know that a lot of people see all the development that's happening in West Sacramento and all of that. I just wanted, this is a very transparent conversation.
Yep.
People may look at this saying, what did this board do to incur debt? So I appreciate you explaining that.
So in the next couple of weeks, that long list of things that I keep hearing, and I always say I'm going to get to all that stuff when I have time. So the next executive summary that you will be getting, and you're welcome to then ask me to do an informational item on the board agenda, is your debt service and history report. And that will actually show you not just where the debt came from, what it was used on, but my projection of when each item will be paid off and what that does to contribution from the general fund in the future.
Appreciate that. I'm sorry I ask every time, but I think that as some new people watching at home or whatnot, we need to continually
Absolutely
ask the same question.
Excuse me, Chief Business Official Benitez, would you also remind us, please, what school districts use developer fees for without internal debt?
Yeah. So developer fees are statutorily restricted, and as are redevelopment fees, and they are to be used for the impacts of growth or the need for not routine or restricted maintenance, but deferred maintenance. So we are also not only paying the debt service out of general fund, but deferred maintenance, like I just asked the board to approve some site improvements at Westfield and now the Southport roof. Instead of having the money in our developer fees to pay for those things, it's all coming out of the general fund right now because we don't have those developer fees. So typically we can only use developer fees when it meets the needs of, we need to build something or repair something that's serving students in the district, because that's specifically what developer fees are for. The way that our COPs, QSCABs, and CREBs were structured, and they're legally structured, is that because we were growing so quickly, we need these revenues to do solar investments, to expand our schools from being K5s or K6s to K8s, to finish building the high school, rather than going to the community and asking for additional bonds to do that work, we decided that we would take out a loan directly from banks, which is what a COP is. It's just like you would go for a personal loan against your revenue. We went to banks, and the revenues that we used to guarantee those payments were largely the excuse me, the developer fee monies coming into the district, with the agreement that it's guaranteed against our general fund, which means that any money that doesn't come in the developer fees to make those payments, we're required to make those payments from the general fund. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that will be in, future agenda item in detail, because I think we keep on coming back to this, and I think it's good to,
yes,
at some point, just get that level of detail for transparency.
Yeah.
But thank you for explaining it at
Of course.
this level right now. So it's actually there's more money in the general fund that we're using for facilities because of things.
That's
of the
correct.
debt service.
That's
Okay.
correct. Yep. Transfers to other funds. I think I covered all the contributions. I got lost there for a second, sorry. Transfers to other funds. We did make transfers out to make sure that some of our other funds were net zero by the end of the fiscal year, and the amount is listed there for you. So Fund 9, the Charter Fund, we contributed $36,512. Down by over $50,000 from the year prior. Fund 12, Child Development, has remained about the same at about $250,000. We anticipate that going down next year with some of the changes that we made from last year to this year, and then we expect that it'll go down again the following year. That's what it's projected at this point. Fund 13, Nutrition Services. The only contribution we're making there, per board direction, is any unpaid school lunches that we were not able to collect to keep that fund solvent, because of course they have to operate and stay solvent, with the exception of that, rather than us trying to continue to collect to keep them solvent. So those are all the contributions made from the 18-19 fiscal year. The interesting part here is that, I'm going to push the wrong button. No, I didn't. So we did carry forward, that's the Southport roofing money from last fiscal year, because we had that approved last year and we weren't able to start the project quite yet. But the other interesting thing, of course, is that if you look at line E in your report, we, in the unrestricted side, which is what contributes to fund balance, we end up, after everybody's unspent dollars are accounted for throughout the district, a $1.6 million fund balance versus the projected $287,000 deficit if everybody had spent all of their budget money. And so that means that that $1.6 million goes to fund balance. Fund balance for economic uncertainty, of course, is our reserve. And we continue to maintain not just the 3% statutory, but the 6%, because the board has an additional 3% that they want to be maintained. Why is that important? Of course, that's because if anything happens, that's our cushion. And as of June 30th, we're in good shape. That's also why I brought, obviously, a prior conversation this evening, the SERP, to you, because looking at where we ended our net position, that's why I was making sure that cash flow and net position was good before I brought it back to you in public session. But those reserves help us maintain a positive fiscal certification, obviously. And we also are using some of that money for deferred maintenance. And those two examples that I gave you this evening are up there this evening. Reserves are one-time funds, though. We don't ever want to spend them in a recurring expense like a salary, because once they're gone, they're gone. So in conclusion, our unrestricted general fund did have an increase in fund balance. One of the questions, and I actually delineated in tonight's agenda item all of the different areas that things were, that we saved money in, and basically it boiled down to two specific areas. And that is, earlier this evening, we heard about getting content and curriculum that was state aligned, and we underspent that category by about $1 million this past year. In other words, we bought about $1 million less of content curriculum than had been budgeted for, and the rest of that big savings actually comes from the number of of positions that we had vacant that all of us were covering for this past year. So you'll notice that the salaries and benefits was underspent because we did a lot of recruiting, and a lot of us were, of course, filling those positions until they could be filled. So those are the two big areas of savings. You'll also see in the detailed report a number of areas that we overspent, but when we cross-reference the savings versus the overspent, that's where we end up with the $1.6 million addition to fund balance.
Chris, real quick. So since people were covering for those positions, does that mean next year we're going to see an increase? Sorry, an increase in those?
We could have a great, I'm sure that Assistant Superintendent Gonzalez and Superintendent Luna and myself could have a great discussion about that. We always see, it used to be referred to as breakage, because you're always going to have vacancies that there's a period of time. Last year, we had a lot that we were juggling. A lot of us were covering stuff, so I think last year was a bit of an unusual year. This year that we're currently in, remember when we did budget reduction, not just did we reduce positions, but we asked departments to reduce their budgets by 10%. So those departments that were maybe not spending 100% of what they had budgeted for, they had less budgeted this year because instead of taking even more positions, we asked for people to cut back on their other spending. The other thing that we brought to the board in budget adoption is we highlighted that the materials budget was going down because we noticed this big variance in what we said we were going to spend versus what we spent, and that's why we lowered that down. So the budget this year is tighter because we looked at those numbers of where we were spending. We call that a burn rate. We were projecting that variance, and that's why we asked people to trim in other areas besides staff this past year as well.
Sure. But the 1.6 million may not, since other staff were covering for that, and we did actually fill in some of those vacancies, maybe that's something to consider as we go ahead, as their costs as well as, benefits may next year show up on a balance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we don't ever count on how many days or months a position might be vacant to yield savings, right? Right. We only count that as a savings once the position is eliminated.
We have to budget for the entire position, whether or not somebody's in it.
That's correct.
Yes, you don't score it until.
Right. Yeah.
Either way, you have to score it either plus or minus. Any other questions? Thank you for the thorough explanation. Trustee Kirby Gonzalez?
Thank you. I'm assuming that the transfer to other funds for charter is Washington Middle College?
That's correct. That's the only one that we financially
I didn't know
run.
if it was oversight fees for charters or anything like that. Okay. Is this a year that we think that will get to zero?
It'll actually be a positive balance. They'll start contributing for operations other than their own this year.
Okay, good, thank you, because I know we've talked about this a few times, and I was surprised to see that number still there, so good. I'm glad to know that about this year. And then just one comment about the curriculum underspent last year, but then the curriculum committee, that we sit on, we are looking at new curriculum this year, and so I imagine, does some of that roll over? Because it will be maybe we will spend more in curriculum this year than was last year, I imagine.
We had an adoption last year as well. I think the difference of what we did is that we asked for estimates this year.
What do you mean?
More accurate budgeting. So it's one thing to say, Chris, what do you want to spend on that new book? Well, I want to spend $1,000. Well, did you get 3 estimates to see what it was actually going to cost, right? So when I said we're tightening the budget process, we're making sure that people are trying to be a bit more accurate than just putting in a figure of what they think. We can think all sorts of things, but we always want some data to back up our thinking, right? So we're actually asking those questions instead of just assuming that the figure that we're given is accurate from the beginning.
Okay, all right, well, thank you for that.
Sure.
Any other questions, comments? I need a motion to adopt. Vice President Pizzotti moves.
I'll
Trustee
second.
Kirby Gonzalez seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so approval of contract amendment with BCA for reconciliation of the scope of services projected construction budget of $15.5 million for the Fallbrook Westmore Oaks homecoming. You're here for a minute. We have one more item after this as well, pulled off the consent, as a reminder.
Thank you, sir. I'm just trying to get my laptop awake after I talk too much.
We ask a lot of questions, as we should when we're looking at our budgets.
Yes. So trustees, I'm requesting approval of contract amendment number 27 with BCA Architects for the reconciliation of the scope. Essentially what this does is reconciles to a $15.5 million construction budget. That's not total project budget, that's just the anticipated construction budget for Fallbrook. The original contract called for reconciliation was submitted for 12.5 construction budget before, of course, we got Measure V in good shape to figure out what was going on. So that reconciliation needs to occur for them to continue work at this time.
Discussion? No? Yeah, Vice President Pizzotti is thinking about whether or not he's going to ask a question.
No.
I'll give you a minute.
I know. I'm going to bite my tongue.
Okay. If there's no discussion, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Trustee Kirkland moves. I will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Oh, wait.
Aye.
Vice President Pizzotti says aye. Clerk Jackson,
Aye.
you have your amendment.
Begrudgingly.
Agreed.
Okay, so now O10, Clerk Jackson, would you like to open up as to approval of contract amendment number 12 with ATI Architects for the Southport roofing project that was mentioned a little bit in the unaudited actuals, so.
Yeah, I pulled that purely off the fact of the, because I know earlier in the evening, we approved we had the contract for approval for over $35,000. Yet, and so this one was placed on the consent, and the total was. So I pulled it strictly just for transparency, out of the sheer fact that the amount was so high. Just so that, I don't want people to get the impression that we're trying to hide the cost for that for some reason.
Yep.
On consent, and so that's why I wanted to pull it off.
Okay, a process pull.
So just to clarify for anybody that's curious, so that is the cost of the architectural fees for the replacement of the administrative and library and early childhood education administrative building at Southport. The roof is failing. It's an asphalt shingle roof. We are looking to replace with a corrugated metal roof, which will have a minimum of a 50-year lifespan. So we're trying to also improve what we're doing, and that is based on a projected project cost of about $600,000. We budgeted $7 million, but it's coming in around $6 million.
Great. Do we have any other questions?
No.
Okay.
I answered my questions.
So Vice President Pizzotti moves.
I'll second.
Clerk Jackson seconds. All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're now going to move on to board governance. I haven't received any requests for nominations for CSBA 2010 Directors at Large, African American, American Indian, and County at Large Directors. No? No? Okay.
I can't do it.
You can.
No, I can't.
Oh, okay. Oh, you can't.
Can you do it?
No, I can't.
No, he won't be here. So anyways, there's no adoption, so we're going to skip on to Q2. The discussion of the Equity Network study session and walk. I don't know if folks looked at their calendars, October 24th and 25th. That's a Thursday and Friday. I think I have the dates correct.
Study
And
session.
So the study session for the work that Trustee Kirby Gonzalez and I are part of the CSB Equity Network. We get a couple days of free consulting hours from our instructors, and they want to come out and work with us on our equity plan that we adopted a little while ago in our board study session.
25th.
And so the 24th should be a Thursday, October.
At 3 o'clock?
At 3 o'clock before our board meeting. So,
Yeah, I think
and
I have
then,
that on the calendar.
and then all day on the 25th, we are They are working with Superintendent Luna and trying to figure out the best school sites to do an equity walk-on, which Trustee Kirby Gonzalez and I actually did one in Elk Grove, and we thought it was really, really helpful to actually apply our learning lens on when we walk campuses, what that means. So it'd be an all-day kind of walkthrough with Nicole Anderson helping to facilitate conversation about our equity goals and applying that to our schools.
And I was thinking about agendizing, and I'm sure that Nicole Anderson has the perfect solutions for that, because we'd want to be really sensitive to people when they're, having visitors on campus. Already it's a vulnerable situation doing walks. So whether that looks like we break into 2 groups of board members, or whether that looks like we walk and don't talk and then debrief later, or whatever that looks like, I just wanted to be sensitive to that and bring that up. But I am available. And
Full day on the 25th, as much as possible.
Maybe.
Okay, part day, okay. But it seems like good dates. And we felt that it was a good time to do it because we were talking about plans and then going into November and budgeting and all that, so it's appropriate timing. And if
We'll
some
bake
people
you
need to join us
cookies.
I found it really helpful,
it's
actually,
really
an equity
helpful.
walk with a facilitator that's outside of our district that we didn't know, to actually help us process this conversation on equity and application of inclusion and other things.
And she's free for us, and I will say one of the state leaders for sure in this work. Yep. So, and talked about the importance of, if possible, having everyone there.
Okay, it seems.
I could potentially make the 25th work.
Okay, so we will put that, so 4 of us can potentially make it work. So let's calendar it, and then we'll move forward from there.
At least some
Definitely
portion
do
of
the
the day.
Thursday. I can make Thursday
Yeah,
available.
okay,
And then possibly
25th.
at least part of the 25th.
Okay, thank you. So we will agendize that and move forward. I'm actually looking forward to the 3:30 board study session to actually have somebody else facilitate the conversation. So, okay, board and superintendent comments. Trustee Kirby Gonzalez.
Thank you. I do not have committee updates. Thank you to Clerk Jackson for stepping in for me with the county 2x2. I look forward to hearing an update on that meeting, and apologize I was not able to attend. We have a curriculum council meeting coming up, which I will be attending. And I recently visited both Riverbank and Westmar Oaks, and I want to point that out because they now have the dual principal model, which was very different, and I was very impressed by that. I was really excited to see how it's working. The reaction to staff was very positive. The reaction from students was very positive, and to see both of those sites, the teamwork and collaboration, it was really great to see, and I appreciated that. Also saw, I think, at Riverbank, in terms of some of those classrooms doing that PBIS work, it really stood out for me, and it just popped. So I'm excited to have that conversation here in terms of where sites are and who are doing, where are the pockets of really, really strong stuff that we want to really highlight and discuss. And tomorrow I'm meeting with the Student Senate at River City High School. I'm looking forward to that. They said that, I think she said I'm super stoked or something like, so I'm excited to meet with them. And above that, I just want to thank of course, our hardworking staff, all they do to prepare for our meetings, our schools, for our kids every single day. The facility meetings were a heavy lift, and getting around to all of those, and I appreciate all of that work. And I also want to thank our parents and families, because this is the time of fall festivals and of fundraisers and of everything else that parents do. And it is so special to walk into a school site and volunteer, or to scoop snow cones along with other families and parents who are there giving up their time just to help make their school site better. And we are better when the whole community is here. And I want to just thank them for all the work they do, especially going into this busy time.
Okay. Clerk Jackson?
I have a few, so bear with me. First, I want to say I was excited to see that AB 1507 passed last month. that really closes some of the loopholes when it comes to charter schools in the state. So that was very good news in my opinion. Kind of puts everyone on on a more equal footing. And kind of piggybacking on some of the comments that were made earlier this evening and then at previous board meetings as far as the community forums. I know most of the community forums as of right now are done. But I think there is some value in potentially trying to schedule one more for the families over at River City. I think we probably would get a different demographic and more, maybe some more valuable input from that community as well. And then one of my daughters recently just started taking guitar lessons, and it was funny because as we were going around trying to find someone to give her guitar lessons, the recommendation came from that we hire. Well, their music teacher used to gives lessons, and so my wife got in contact with them. Come to find out that he's no longer at their school. But the interesting thing about it was, and he doesn't know me. He doesn't know who I am or that the fact that I'm on the board here now. But he and I were chatting on Monday after the lesson, and the comment that he made to me was very interesting, and it kind of got me to thinking that I think a lot of times we do things. I've observed that we do a lot of things just because that's just the way that it's always been done, and just because it's the way it's always been done doesn't mean that it's right. And I take him as an example because as he and I were chatting after my daughter's guitar lesson on Monday, I said, "Well, why did you leave?" And he said, quite honestly, he goes, "I got tired of packing my stuff up every 12 weeks and having to move." Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it got me thinking. I'm like, you know what? That's unfortunate because he honestly said, and he said, I didn't want to leave. He goes, but I was tired. He goes, every 12 weeks I had to pack up all my stuff and move to another campus. Yeah. And it's very clear to me that VAPA is something that is very, very important to the people of this community. And I think it's worth the investment to not only in our kids, but the investment in our teachers. If we had just hired 2 more math teachers, how many more students could that have impacted? Because now all of a sudden, instead of him having to pack up every 12 weeks to move to another campus, he can stay on one campus. The other 2 music teachers can go to another campus. Then all of a sudden, we can create an elective wheel at the schools that can then be utilized by the middle school students that would have improved the quality of the education for all of our kids. We can create a wheel with foreign language, drama, music, orchestra, with all kinds of different things like that, simply by hiring a couple of more teachers to kind of fill those roles. And just because it's something, the way that we've always done it this way, that doesn't mean that it's good. And I think it's time that we take the time to start investing and looking into that and finding ways where we can make those things better for our kids, because it will solve a lot of issues. And I promise you, if we had something like that where there was an elective wheel type of a system at our K-8 schools, that we probably would stop the hemorrhaging of kids that are leaving West Sacramento and coming over to my school. Because a lot of the kids that we get from West Sacramento that come to my school are coming because their parents want them to have that rich elective environment, which is what we offer at a comprehensive middle school. So I noticed that, and that was something that really kind of struck home with me, because I'm like, wow, because I'm sorry, my daughter loves her guitar lessons. I'm like, man, how much better would it be if she was able to take guitar lessons from him at the school versus having to go to his private studio. So I really would encourage us to look at ways that we can make that improvement and make those improvements for our kids, because it would be extremely beneficial to all of the kids in the district. Had a chance to go to the movie night held at Bridgeway Island last weekend. It was, needless to say, was a huge success. I think the kids were more interested in visiting and socializing with their friends than they were watching the movie. But nonetheless, it was nice to see the multi-purpose room just absolutely packed with students and families and kids like that on last Friday and watching that. I did have a chance to go to the fill in for Trustee Kirby Gonzalez at the county 2x2 the other day, and I tell you, there was a lot of fantastic information that was shared at that meeting, and I think there's a lot of fantastic information that needs to be shared, not only with the community but also with our staff. The topic had come up of disseminating some of this information out through our staff through professional development. Because I think there's a lot of resources that people probably aren't aware that exist in our district or in our county that are available for our families that are experiencing homelessness and other issues that I think if people knew about them, that they would be better utilized to be able to help them to utilize those services. And also last week I had a chance to meet with 100 Black Men of Sacramento and to discuss the potential of them coming into our district to mentor and help starting mentor programs, things like that with the students in our district. They were extremely excited and very much looking forward to developing a relationship with Washington Unified and coming over and helping provide their services to our kids, which is something that is extremely and much needed. And then lastly, I think kind of going back to something I said earlier, I think a lot of times when I'm thankful that we're going through the process for this facilities master plan, because I think a lot of times when things were done, and this is not a knock on previous boards or previous administration, things like that, but it's just kind of an observation. Is that a lot of times when we have certain projects, certain things just get overlooked, with the assumption that we can't do it now, but we'll fix it later, and then all of a sudden that later never comes.
Right.
And I think that's how we find ourselves in situations where we have the problems with the equipment at the football stadium or the equipment in the gym. I don't think it was anything that was done that was meant to be malicious. I think it was something that was just probably just overlooked and just never gotten back to. So there's ways that we can try and rectify some of those situations, because again, if we're talking about spending money on today's dollars on today's kids, those are some of the best ways that we can do that, by helping to bring some of those facilities that really wouldn't take a very nominal investment on the part of the district to kind of help improve those things. You could probably get both of them down for about $25,000 and put a very adequate sound system in both of those facilities, and even addressing some of the other facilities and equipment issues that we discovered at the high school as well. But those are things that I think that moving forward, particularly in the immediate future, that I think there's ways and things that we can do where we can actually help improve the quality of the learning experience for all of our kids by helping address some of those issues. So I'm excited about the things that we have going on, especially with the doctor's wins coming into the district and getting that project started. And I feel like we're kind of at this perfect storm of opportunities, and where we have the ability to be able to do a lot of good and a lot of positive things. But just talking about them is not going to get the job done. It's time to start to put some things in action. And I thank you to Superintendent Luna for going out and getting the visits scheduled for herself and her team that she's going to be bringing over to the schools, to Sutterville Elementary and California Middle School in Sacramento, to take a look at the inclusive practices there, and so that we can find ways where we can help improve special education for our children, our special education children here in our district as well. I'm very excited for that. I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to getting the feedback and finding out the things that you guys learn, the things that you guys pick up on those visits, because I know those two principals are an absolute wealth of knowledge and will be able to answer any and all questions that you guys may have in terms of that. So I would say bring as many questions as you possibly can, ask as many questions as you possibly can, and pick their ears for everything that they have, because they are more than willing to help in any way that they can, because they see the value, they've experienced the value of having kids, and the value of inclusive practices in our district. And that's something that is very much needed in this one as well.
Great, thank you, everybody. I am feeling grateful that we are really getting really super focused. Oh, sorry. Vice President Pizzotti, would you like to go
That's
last?
fine.
Go ahead, Vice
That's
President Pizzotti.
just fine.
I'm looking over here. Go ahead. The educators are on this side. Go ahead.
I really don't have that much
Vice
to
President
say, but Trustee Jackson, I just know you just made Superintendent Luna's heart like melt when you talked about, music and getting more music teachers, and I could see her face beam as soon as you said it. So, and I would agree with you on that. I think that is something that is very sorely needed in this district, especially as I'm starting to explore, instruments for my daughter as well. And I wanted to say something that, in terms of, we just went through our 504 process for my daughter for the year, and I wanted to say a big shout out and kudos to the 504 team, that not only did her teacher this year meet with us, her teacher from last year came in and decided to say, hey, you know what? I know what works with her, so here's some tricks. Let's try and do these sorts of things to help her, get into a position to succeed. That was really great. I mean, that kind of made me feel, wow, okay, our teachers and staff, they absolutely care so much about our kids that they're willing to take time out of their day and their afternoon when they're no longer teaching their kids anymore. And that was just so impressive to me. So I would say a big shout out to our teachers and staff, especially in the special ed department, or not special ed department, but at our Bridgeway,
Special ed.
yeah. So when I, went through that, I was just so thrilled. I was just thrilled when I walked away. I was absolutely thrilled by that. I do wanted to say thank you to Superintendent Luna for your goals and taking into consideration some of the things that we have been saying for a little while now and implementing them. Clerk Jackson and I have kind of been really pushing the idea that athletics is a part of academics. It is a pathway. It is a chance to get to college for many kids. And each year you see we get athletic scholarships to play, and we honor them here. So, I think that's something that is very important, even badminton.
There are scholarships for badminton. Because there aren't a lot of players who are interested, the likelihood of you getting on a girls' badminton team is very, very strong.
I'm just saying it's a good option. It is a good option.
I think some team building should be playing badminton.
There we go. Anyway, I just wanted to say that it's really nice to see that. And, for somebody who actually the only way I got into college was playing a sport. That's something that I really do appreciate, that being acknowledged. And then, again, with the facilities, I thank you for bringing these issues forward and having the meetings and sending out the survey and getting the data back. So we now have an opportunity to actually do something. And you're right, it does take action. We now have a plan, or we will have a plan eventually. We don't have one yet, but we have all the data to put into place for a plan, right? So eventually we will get one, and then we'll be able to follow through on that. And that is, something I think is very important for not only this board, but future boards, right? So, and it's not just us, it's all of us and whoever may be sitting here in the future. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And other than that, that's all I got.
Okay. Now it's my turn. And my baton. Technically, the president, as he or she facilitates, can go whenever he or she wants to.
This is true.
So, yeah, I'm actually feeling good about where we are in terms of strategy. We've had lots of uncomfortable conversations, facilities, budget, all of that, layoffs. I feel like we're in a good place. I feel like the governance calendar has been adopted. And I want us as a board to be strategic, right? Where we have our calendar. It's about almost October, November. We're going to talk about a board study session. Public has brought up a lot of things. We brought up a lot of things like athletics and new badminton courts instead of a VAPA, like maybe auditorium. If you see that, it wasn't from me. That was not my surveillance. In any case, and I'm glad that we're in a space that we can laugh about it. But in all honesty, I appreciate us getting through the humps of last year. I know it was challenging making the cuts. But I know that just having the conversation now, being thoughtful, knowing that there might be more investments, and I've heard even tonight, invest in this, this, and this. And we have to prioritize some things. And we need to be strategic about it. And we need to be thoughtful, A, B, C, and D, right? So we have to be, to some degree, a linear person. I know that people think I'm everywhere, but I'm actually on process a very linear person. So I'm looking forward to the board study session in regards to program priorities and what budgets are available. I know we talked about OPEB, but does that mean we're putting off deferred maintenance? I'm looking forward to all of those conversations, right? And so that's all of those things need to be lumped into our responsibilities, our fiduciary responsibilities as board members. So I'm not saying no, I'm just saying that those are all different types of factors that we need to kind of weigh in. Yesterday was a really good conversation with the county 2x2. County District 2x2. I wasn't sure what it would look like. But yesterday we had two subjects. We had discussion about homeless services that Supervisor Sandy had actually originally asked to be put on the agenda. And then I've also put on the agenda the opportunity to plan together on school-based mental health services for innovation grants that was included in the budget. So the county has to apply for it. The county and district have to apply, but we have to plan together about what that means. We came away with two concrete action items. Was that I don't know if she was the homeless coordinator for the county. She oversaw the homeless programs for the county. And and I'm sure everybody on this board and the public gets gets kind of contacted by the public and asks, where do I find services? And I had to admit that I actually didn't know where to go to figure out all the services in the county. And they said, well, we don't have a website. We don't have the provider network, right? So there's different levels of that. There's an HPAC, a policy level meeting that I think Dr. Phillips will now start going to in terms of the systems kind of work at that very, very high level of how are county services, how are they considering schools in this conversation? And I think I put out there, and I think it's true, is that I think we have the largest number of students experiencing homelessness in the county of all the districts. Right, and so it's a priority. It should be a priority for us in terms of once a family gets stable and all of that, and if the county is providing those resources, how do we work together? That's the high-level policy. They also do regular MDTs, which is case consultation of in the moment, if in the emergency services. So that's happening, but what's missing is the providers, and we're a provider of education. And so they don't yet have a body in which the providers of homeless services or providers who are addressing the needs of families and students who are experiencing homelessness to meet. So they want to have an inaugural meeting, and I believe that Supervisor Vega suggested that maybe we can kick off that first provider meeting, hold space or something like that. So the providers at that level can talk about their day-to-day operations, right? That doesn't necessarily mean a Dr. Phillips. It might mean your lead social worker, your lead outreach worker, to talk about kind of that that middle level of services, right? How they interact on the day-to-day, not high-level policy, not the individual case, but actually at that level, how are providers working together? So I'm excited about that. Victor Services came and presented on what they were providing with the monies that the county was giving them, right? Because I hadn't realized, because we see the benefit of Victor and everything, but it didn't occur to me that the county supervisors who approve these contracts actually don't know. So kind of having the ability to give I think it was 5 pages of services that Victor provides to our families, which is amazing, which is either free to us or low cost to EPSDT, and so that was amazing. But also to think together about 5 pages. About what does innovation mean? So it's not, what are the gaps in services here? And a lot of what we've talked about is the services that we provide require that families be Medi-Cal eligible, right? So EPSDT, but a lot more families need that prevention and early intervention. So maybe we can partner together on serving all of our kids and those gaps and those cracks. So excited about that. So those were definitely the next steps of what was going on with the county district 2x2, leveraging the resources that actually come through the county that our parents and families and students need. So I'm excited about that. I went to the Riverbank facilities meeting. It was different than the Elkhorn, less, not as well attended. I should say that I was a little bit disappointed that nobody was really there for preschool, and we lumped it together. And I'm not sure if anybody put anything down on the preschool. The same people come every time, but preschool parents. I'm not sure if preschool parents were there to TK preschool parents. I could be wrong. Perhaps the people who were putting down the comments about preschool have preschool-aged children. And so that's another gap, like similar with the high school, of like whether or not we're actually getting kind of the full comprehensive kind of input from parents who have TK or preschool students. So that's what I wanted to put out there on the facilities. And it's nobody's fault, right? So it's just a matter of how do we get to those parents, make sure that the surveys are being completed. With that said, we have 5 minutes till 10 o'clock. I'm going to wrap up.
But we will extend for the superintendent.
If the superintendent would like to go past 10 o'clock, you have, please, yes.
Do you want to extend the time right now, so?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, it'll be more than, okay.
Yeah, a motion to extend.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, trustees. I only have actually 9 or 10 slides, so I will go quickly, but
Only 9:37.
But I am jumping out of my skin, and just for the record, Trustee Jackson has never spoken to me about VAPA, so I never. I want it put on record. I want to put on record
So
that
you didn't tee him up for this? Is that what you're
I
saying?
did not. We have not spoken about this, and I really want that on the record because I have to tell you, thank you for the permission to not do things as we always have done. I'm a music major, and I have seen school districts with scope and sequence of kindergarten through grade 12 of what music education really can be. And my daughter is finishing her last year in a master's program in music education and will be entering the real work world, which I'm so excited about, that she'll be independently on her own, out of our home, working full-time next year. But that said, we can do better. Our system is not right. It just, at this point, in the priorities in my past 4 years, we needed to address the English language arts, the English learners, the math curriculum, and our instructional practices, and set up systems to help our teachers to be supported and to be more successful. So that said, we are in a good place. That said, we have to address the VAPA wheel. I have to say this before I go into my update, because we have a VAPA task force that is coming this year in place. We have to address it because we have to rethink our system. And if it is the same teacher that I think you're talking about, he's an exemplary musician, he's an exemplary teacher, and he's right. We couldn't change our system fast enough to keep him here. And I was very sorry to see him leave. He actually was a student teacher under one of my college colleagues, and he's an exemplary educator. So that said, we are addressing VAPA. I may not have mentioned that, but we have to because of what we're looking at in terms of prep time for our teachers next year, and because our system needs an overhaul. But I'm going to tell you, it may not make people happy, but what we need to look at is a sustainable VAPA program so that our district can continue the program services. Whew, I'm so happy. Okay, so now I'll go into my update.
I'm not sure if that was in your superintendent goals.
It will be under educational opportunities. All right, our first thing is we in our district have just provided 3 courses of CPR certification. And we feel that that's so important because we want to be sure, as part of our safety plans, that we are getting training in this particular area. So starting next week, we will have a total of 40 AEDs in our district. Now, we're already compliant. But what we've done is we have expanded the access of these AEDs to install more in our schools and our district offices, but have mobile AEDs for athletic programs and other field trips to have with them. So I'm pretty excited about this. It sounds pretty simple, but if we need our staff to be trained, and it's kind of scary. I went through the training. I will admit I went into the first class. It was time for me to get certified again because it does expire. And, you know, the training was excellent because it's very hands-on. They make you go through it, and they teach you a lot in a very short period of time. So I want to thank the 60 staff members who have taken the time to do this after hours to be certified. And we're going to continue this kind of training as part of our safety. I mentioned earlier that our parent forum was held over at River City High School. I can't wait to hear about it. Principal Billingsley was really excited to be able to just bring parents together to talk about real issues that our kids are experiencing. And it just isn't about schools dealing with it, although it is. It's about parents. Did you know? What are the signs to look at home? And particularly in the area of vaping, if you've seen those commercials, it scares me. It scares me. And I want to make sure that we are addressing it because it is a real issue that our students are feeling pressure about. As you know, next month it is anti-bullying month, and our schools are putting intentional efforts towards activities to help bring deeper awareness. So that started tonight over at River City in terms of anti-bullying. And I want to thank our SROs that were there tonight with all the administration and our school nurses who were there for the parents to really be able to have those conversations with the people who are there to help and support. Here are just some of the activities that our schools are going to be doing. So we've ordered all the orange wristbands across the district, so everybody will be in on that. Wednesday, October 23rd is our Orange Unity Day that we'll be doing, joining the nation with, so we're going to push that effort as well. But we have school sites doing much more intentional activities across the district, and I'm grateful and thankful for that. I want to give a shout out also to our PTOs who are really helping with a lot of these efforts. So those are just some of the activities that are going on. In terms of our work with the WINS, they're going to begin their work on Monday, October 7th. There are 4 dates there that they will be doing school site observations from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Now, those observations are also having forum discussions with parents, with students, and then with staff. So they're just going to start engaging, getting to know people at the schools, and just asking some questions about where we are and how people are feeling. So they're doing their initial observations on these dates here. We're really excited about it. I don't know what it looks like, but I'm excited to hear what they're seeing and the good things that are happening, and then the things that we want to focus on. Talking about the standards-aligned instruction, we have 6 coaching days at every site to help support the work of the standards-aligned instruction. So last year we were implementing, we were piloting, we were wrestling. We did a lot of wrestling last year about assessments and are these particular lessons, are they rigorous enough or are they too rigorous? So this year we're implementing, and in implementing that means we need help. So coaching services through the ICLE, the International Center for Learning and Excellence, which is under Bill Daggett. And that's pretty powerful in itself, that organization. It's across the nation. But they've been the ones to help our teachers create these units of study. So you see there on the right-hand side, that's one of our ICLE coaches. His name is John. He's the one that has been with our teachers for the past year and a half, trying to create lessons, creating assessments. And he's not doing the work, he's just engaging in the conversations and doing the metrics of maybe we need to look at the standards in a different way. He's a great coach. And so what you see here, this is Westmore Oaks. We have moved away from gotcha. Please notice there are no clipboards in anybody's hands. This is about, again, the growth model. We are here to coach and support versus say what is always wrong. Instead, we coach through that, and that's what instructional coaching is about. Wanted to also, for those who are watching, we have free flu shots that are being offered at the rec center in collaboration with Yolo County. But since it's on one of our campuses right there next to River City, I want our families to know, and we've sent out a communication today, that there are free flu shots, not just for the adults, but for the children, that are being offered on October 22nd. Just one date that we want to put on our families and communities' radar. It is homecoming, and I understand that homecoming is chosen at the school because they look at the schedule, and you want to make sure you have a successful homecoming as possible. I understand that. Our homecoming, again, unfortunately, is on a board meeting night. Now, homecoming is on Friday, officially, but the Parade of Mascots is where all of our K-8 schools come together, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger event. Thursday night, on October 24th, we will engage again in the Parade of Mascots. The PTO presidents have been talking about it. They started talking about it last spring. So it is a big event where we come out to support the football team during homecoming that nobody goes to, and that's the freshman team. And that's on Thursday nights. So again, we're going to have that. And then the homecoming game is on October 25th, that Friday. I invite all of us out there. It's always a great family night. It's a packed night. The band is always out there playing, and River City staff, and usually I'm out there, and board members, we kind of hang out at one of the, I don't know what you call it in football, one of the ends, whatever you call that end.
End zone?
End zone?
End zone, okay. End zone. At least it's not a base. An end zone where you can hang out with the families. I told you I was a band member, not an athlete. So we're really pushing that Thursday Parade of Mascots because it really brings our families together. We transport families from different schools to try to get as many participants out as possible.
Look at that duck.
Yeah, couldn't you do that between the the JV game and the varsity game on Friday night?
Well, this is how it's scheduled this year, and we'll take
It is
a
not
look
about
at
you.
it.
It's not about you, Vice President Pizzotti.
And it's also-
You are free to actually not,
Mike Heroes.
you are free to not, to
But
forsake
it's-
your duties as a vice president and go. We will know where you're at.
It's also to really support the freshman team, because nobody ever goes out to support them, and they have a packed house that night. So we're excited about this new tradition. Okay, so lastly, this is my last slide. I just wanted to give a few dates that are coming up. It is Harvest Festival time. We have 3 schools that currently have schedules. I think there are more schools that have some Harvest Festivals that will be coming up either at the end of October or beginning of November. Want to remind the board that we do have our annual elected officials breakfast on October 18th, which is a Friday. And that's when the 5 school districts do their presentation about their school district. And we honor all of our elected officials that night, that morning as well. So we want to remind the board about that. We do have parent conferences the week of October 21st, besides it being the week of homecoming as well. So that is my very short update this evening. I will end on a celebration. If you receive the news ledger, I just want to bring your attention to yesterday's edition. We had, there's evidently a new editor, author, publisher, writer for the ledger. And we have our co-principals that are featured on here with the Q&A. And so I just wanted to bring that celebration to you. They've been back in touch with us. We are always available to our media, especially to our local media. And so they are back in touch with us and working with us again. So anyway, that's my update this evening. Thank you.
Great. All right, moving on to future board agenda items. S1, board policy and parent handbooks regarding cell phone use and dress code. S2, review of programs for students with special needs, inclusion co-teaching, learning center, RSP, SDC, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. S3, review of MTSS PBIS programs. S4, after-school care education, enrichment and athletic program review. And S5, the board budget study session, to be scheduled probably in November, I'm thinking, because we only have one board member, meeting in November. So I'm thinking that the board study session will be sometime in November, if that is okay with folks.
That's good. Can I clarify? I'm good with November, not to speak for others, but
Not before our board meeting?
It's just every year we do a board study session on budget, and it's just a conversation with staff about programs so we can get an idea of budgeting. But yes, Trustee Kirby Gonzalez?
So we had initially talked about giving direction that we were hoping that staff could create what are their needs, what do they want to use with some of the extra funding versus coming this direction. I imagine VAPA might be part of that conversation. But is it my understanding that that might be happening here too? We'd hear some recommendations from staff at that?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
that's the intention of that.
Wonderful.
That's study session.
Thank you.
Because I think oftentimes we're limited here, so study sessions will allow us to have the conversation and give staff appropriate direction. Is anything else missing from future board agenda items? So for transparency, because there's so many board policies that are coming up, facilities use, et cetera, I had suggested that we actually invoke the policy subcommittee that still exists. And so Board Trustee Jackson and I will have a discussion, go through it, and then bring it back to the board for a fuller discussion, because oftentimes at the end of the evening, we are very tired and limited, and so hopefully we can have fresh eyes and brains and explain that to the board, what's going on. Okay.
Can you just let us on new policy, on what piece are you talking
On
about?
these, so cell phone use, dress code.
Okay, so that will be, so you'll be, okay.
Yeah, we'll do a first read of the proposals by
Got it.
staff, and then bring it back to the board as we had in the past. Okay? So, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second? All in favor? Aye. We are so adjourned.